Shaggy swore under his breath again and looked back at the approaching group of K-Tech guards. They were all wearing black plastic-looking armor that Shaggy assumed was standard for their corporation. The lead soldier, a squat, tough-looking purple alien, was sizing up Shaggy and his friends as he and 4 other guards approached. They had been at the edge of the street, but the K-Tech guards jogged over. Shaggy felt it best to stay put, otherwise they would risk another running battle through Austin. Which was fun, but not what they needed right now. As they got closer, the leader raised an armor-clad fist and his fellow guards stopped and covered their leader with mean-looking energy rifles. At least, that's Shaggy assumed they were. The normal circular barrel of standard gun was replaced with a long rectangular-shaped opening. Shaggy was sure he saw blue arcs of energy crisscross the opening. I'll ask again. What are you doing here? Shaggy racked his brain for a reasonable lie, but Vlad and Slink beat him to it. We're looking for work. We heard there was a construction company out here. The alien guard quirked an eyebrow but said nothing as he glanced at the 5 of them. Dave gave a cheery wave as he was assessed, while Shaggy and Ren nodded in agreement at their friend's explanation. Shaggy looked for a name tag or any other identifying marks on the man's armor, but he couldn't find anything. If he hadn't run into this same type of armor in the junkyard in Undertown, he would have never known these guys were K-Tech. Shuffling under the man's scrutinizing gaze, Shaggy and his friends waited for the guard to finish. Once he had studied each of them a few times, he sighed heavily. Well, you're in the right place. That building back there is Spiegel Brothers Construction. Vlad nodded understandingly. Oh. Kind of a lot of guards for a construction site. Isn't it? The K-Tech guard snorted. No kidding. But the city wants all the construction companies protected as they focus on rebuilding. So each site was given 3 full squads from the various security firms and corporations in Austin. He waved for them to follow as he turned back to his cadre of soldiers and waved a hand. You boys are right on time. As I understand it, the Spiegel brothers are a little short-staffed right now. Something about their people being scared off by giant robots. Shaggy shared a glance with Ren as they walked slowly behind the talkative guard. Vlad looked to be listening intently as Dave and Slink nodded amicably at the other guards, who took up positions around their little group. Ren gave Shaggy a quick shrug and continued walking. Shaggy kept one ear on the purple alien's ramblings, but mostly he spent the time quickly cataloging the guards' scent trails. He didn't know if it would be helpful, but he figured knowing where the guys with the big energy guns were was probably a good thing. They passed through a large brick archway and into the construction site proper. Well, Shaggy didn't think it was an actual construction site. More of an office building surrounded by a few warehouses. People rushed around carrying boxes, while forklifts and giant aliens carried the heavier loads to nearby trucks. Shaggy saw one of Blobby's race of aliens rapidly sorting through packages with their lime-green tentacles. He wasn't sure what packages went through a construction company, but he filed it away. Their guide, Skorach, led them to the office building at the center of the site and waved a plastic card at the reader next to the front door. The door buzzed loudly and the purple alien led them inside. A cool blast of AC hit them all and Shaggy even saw some guards sigh in relief at the cool breeze. But they quickly rallied themselves back to their stoic looks as they were hustled toward the front desk. A young blond man was seated at the desk, tapping away at a Holo-Terminal. The man barely spared them a glance as their rather large group crowded up to his chest-high counter. Shaggy grimaced as they waited to be acknowledged. He always hated when receptionists did this. He could clearly see them. At least say hi. But the blonde punk just kept tapping away until he finished what he was doing and sent the lot of them a saccharine smile that Shaggy didn't believe for a minute. Hello. My name is Luke. How may I help you today? Skorach snorted as he waved at Shaggy and his friends. We got some volunteers for you. We were actually hoping for paid positions, actually. Vlad quickly interjected. Shaggy nodded dumbly before he remembered they weren't actually here for jobs. Luke scanned them all briefly before he nodded and started digging for something under his counter. Shaggy hoped the Scourge and his guards would leave, but the stubborn bastards seemed content to relax in the cool office air. Dave was wandering off toward a water fountain, while Slink and Ren watched Luke dig through his desk. Shaggy spun slowly and took in the entire reception area. Other than Luke's large wall-to-wall desk in the center of the room was pretty sparse. Chairs dotted the wall opposite the large desk, clearly there for people to wait in. Along the western wall were two brown swinging doors leading further into the office building. On the eastern side were two doors with large blue signs that read bathroom. Shaggy returned his gaze to Luke as the blonde-headed man came up from behind the desk with a pile of paperwork and a weird gray box. Luke set the box on his counter and flared a few sheets of paper in front of them. Dave ran back over just in time to shoot Luke a quick, "Thanks, dude." Luke raised an eyebrow at Dave's tone as he explained. "These are standard contracts for freelance workers operating under the Spiegel brothers. In them you will find that you are not, nor can you identify yourself as a member of the Spiegel Brothers Corporation. Also, there is a waiver which absolves the Spiegel brothers of all responsibility if you are hurt during the course of your duties. If you perform the duties assigned to you adequately, the Spiegel brothers may upgrade your contract to part-time employment. However, that will only be done after a full month of recorded work, and if there are any infractions of demerits, you will be let go." Questions? Shaggy had a very hard time keeping the disgusted look off his face as he stared down at the freelance contract. It was a shit deal, for certain, and he wasn't entirely sure they should all go through with it. But Vlad had almost immediately picked up a pen and was filling out the forms. Shaggy sighed as he watched the others follow the vampire's lead. He picked up a pen Luke had set on the desk and began filling out the various questions. On the sheet, they were mostly standard questions. Name, species, birthday, address. Shaggy made up most of it as he quickly filled out the paperwork. Once he got to the section on special skills and abilities, though, he stopped. He wasn't sure if he wanted to go around shouting that he was a werewolf. So after a quick think, he just put down he was a mildly enhanced mutant. After skimming the contract a few times, Shaggy finally placed it back on the counter and glanced at his friends. The guards had all filed out of the reception area at some point, and Vlad and Ren were in a couple of seats, murmuring. Dave was still at the counter along with Slink. Both looked like they were taking a test they hadn't studied for as they slowly filled out their paperwork. After a few more slow minutes, they finished and Luke took their papers. "Thank you. You'll be happy to know that the company is currently offering freelancers an extra 200 credits a day because of the current crisis within the city. However, that is only after the completion of the day's work and only after a certified Spiegel Brothers employee checks off on your work." As he spoke, Luke was feeding their papers into the strange gray box he had placed on the desk. After a short whirring noise, the box spat out 5 white ID cards. Luke placed them on the counter and Shaggy and the others grabbed them. They were simple IDs with no pictures, just their names and the areas they would be working. Shaggy glanced back at the gray box, but Luke was already putting it back under his counter. Shaggy spun his ID for the others to see. "I got the warehouse." "Same," said Ren. "Offices." Slink mumbled. "Yo, dudes, I got deliveries." "Like, what deliveries does a construction company do?" Shaggy ignored Dave as Ren explained he was probably moving boxes with a forklift or driving a truck. Vlad was next to the counter, gripping it tightly as he stared at his ID. Shaggy raised an eyebrow and walked around to see where the vampire would be going. Once he saw, he smiled and nodded his head. "Office supply clerk." "Not bad." Vlad shot him a withering look, but said nothing as Luke coughed. "Ahem, excuse me, but if you are done? Well, for the warehouse workers, you can go right back outside along with our deliverman. As for the supply clerk and the office gopher, you are going to need to go through those double doors and follow the signs to the 3rd floor offices. Have a nice day." Shaggy grunted at the obvious dismissal and headed for the door. He shot Vlad an evil grin before he made it outside. But the sudden sun in his face dampened his mood sharply. Shaggy and the others pocketed their IDs and started walking toward the nearest warehouse. Shaggy could see the large group of K-Tech guards still crowded around the front gate. Why the hell are they just loitering like that? Shouldn't they be patrolling or something? Shaggy muttered, jerking his head at the group. Ren snorted. Pfft. That would be the case if they wanted to be here or do their jobs. Just look at them. They are obviously bored. Hell, they flagged us down all the way across the street just to have something to do. Shaggy shrugged as he turned toward the large gray metal warehouse beside the brick office building. Well, that should make working around them easy enough. So, what's the plan, anyway? Dave asked. Shaggy stopped as he tried to think of a course of action. Normally, he would just burst in and start breaking stuff. But they had been far more subtle about this entire operation than he was used to. Luckily, Ren helped him out. We do our jobs and gather information. We need to know where to hit these people. The high-tech guards at the front gate are going to be a challenge anyway, but we might find some way to sabotage this complete business from within. So be on the lookout and memorize what you can. Shaggy grumbled as they entered a sweltering hot metal warehouse. Would be easier if we could just set the damn place on fire. Ren snorted. Sure. If you can do that without alerting the K-Tech guards, go ahead and try. I'm going to figure out how we can mess these guys up and maybe profit from it. Shaggy was about to ask how Ren was going to turn this into a profit, but he was interrupted by the guttural yell of some alien. Hey! You, the new meat? Get your asses on the line and start moving those materials into the trucks. We have sites that need those materials ASAP. Also, whichever one of you geniuses is our truck driver, come with me and we'll get you a truck. If any of you damage anything, it is coming out of your paychecks. Understand me? The surly and furry alien woman glared at all of them, before she spun on a heel and started walking away. Dave quickly moved to follow as Ren and Shaggy glanced around at the pallets of brick and wood that filled the warehouse. New pallets were being brought in as human and alien workers shifted the pallets. Some used forklifts, while others just lifted whole pallets up and found the corresponding truck to place them in. Shaggy grumbled under his breath again as he moved toward a pallet and read the tag on its cellophane-wrapped surface. A truck number was clearly printed on the side, and he grumbled again as he debated lifting the thing or finding a forklift or pallet jack. Ren had stopped near a pallet of wood slats and simply lifted them into the air before he gave Shaggy a jaunty salute and wandered off. Shaggy swore under his breath this time as he gave his pallet a few practice lifts. He grunted under the thing's weight, but he figured he could lift the thing toward the nearest truck and chuck it in. But that would exhaust him fast. Instead, he found a pallet jack and dragged the pallet near its truck and just lifted the thing in. A few of the other workers watched him for a few seconds, but eventually they went back to their own work. He kept his ears open as he wound the pallet jack through the various pallets, sighing all the while. It was going to be a long workday. He caught sight of Dave a few times as well. But even the normally chatty player was being stonewalled by the rest of the employees. Dave took it all in stride and even forced his friendship on several of the drivers. But Shaggy couldn't tell if that had borne fruit yet. But at least Dave was allowed out of the sweltering hot box Shaggy found himself caged in. The work was fairly easy. He just moved the pallets to their corresponding truck and threw the damn thing in. A few drivers had griped about proper placement, but Shaggy just flashed his pointed teeth and they left it alone. He had just tossed another pallet into the back of a white truck when a loud whistle resounded through the warehouse. Shaggy had to cover his ears as the sound shook his damn skull. All right, pansies. Get some chow in ya and then get back here on the double. Lunch is 30 minutes. If you go even 1 minute over, I'm docking you a full hour's pay. Got that? Shaggy bit back a retort and wiped a hand over his sweaty face. He briefly worried about heat exhaustion as he trudged out of the warehouse and into the relative coolness of the outside. The sun was on its way down, but the Texas heat still beat down on them. Shaggy caught sight of Wren's large form heading toward a shady spot near the office building and moved to follow. He could see some of the other workers pulling out lunch boxes and paper bags, but he really didn't feel like eating right now. "Dude." A thump on Shaggy's back made him trip forward a bit. He stopped himself from turning and decking the grinning face of Dave. The happy-go-lucky player was shuffling along on his feet like he didn't have a care in the world. Shaggy grunted through gritted teeth and said, "Having fun, Dave?" Shaggy merely grunted as they joined a tired-looking Wren in the office's building's shadow. The shade of the building helped, but Shaggy was tempted to take off his t-shirt and used it to sop up the damn sweat he was practically swimming in. Dave looked at both of them before he snorted. "Dudes. Y'all are, like, completely sweaty." Shaggy and Wren glanced at each other before they glared at the smiling player. Their glares seemed to bounce off Dave's shield of cluelessness. Shaggy sighed and moved to sit next to Wren. Dave joined him and the three of them put their heads together. Shaggy was about to tell them how useless his day had been, but Wren held up a large gray hand. In the center of his palm was a slim piece of paper with the words "We're being watched" printed on it. Shaggy raised an eyebrow as Dave immediately started looking around. Wren jerked their friend's head back around and shook his head. Shaggy sighed and started looking for something to write on. Wren seemed to get what was happening and dug into his pant pockets. Soon the three of them were tearing bits of paper and writing quick messages. "Why?" Shaggy wrote. Wren just shook his head as Dave rapidly scrawled something. Like, "Is it the cops, dudes?" Shaggy blinked at the fact that the man wrote like he spoke, but Wren shook his head again and wrote his own quick message. "It's the employees." "Company loyalty?" "Don't think so. Maybe it's, like, a body snatcher situation?" "What do we do?" Wren was scribbling down an answer when a loud voice shattered their quiet conversation. "Hey! Who are you guys with?" The three of them turned and stood as a tan-skinned man and 6 other humanoids had walked over to them. Shaggy silently berated himself as Wren crumpled up his bits of paper and turned to address the crowd of workers. "With?" Wren asked. The tan man that had spoken sneered as he explained. "Yeah, who you with? This is a union gig. We can't be having any non-union workers taking jobs away from hardworking Chow certified workers." "Chow? You can't be freaking serious!" Shaggy shouted over Wren's question. He was still extremely heated. In both senses of the word, and the fact these bastards had been watching them over some union versus non-union nonsense was something that grated on him. He was all for unions, but for these guys to ignore them all day just because they weren't union annoyed the hell out of him. Shaggy pushed his way past Wren and stared up at the tan man. Shaggy came up to the man's shoulder, but he was sure that if he needed to, he could cut through the damn bastard. Wren hissed at his shoulder, but Shaggy ignored it as he glared at the taller man. "Oh, we take our union very serious around here. Mr. Chow has worked very hard so that no upstart pipsqueak and his friends could come in here and take jobs away from us honest worker types." The man smiled down at Shaggy as he spoke, and Shaggy was sure the smug bastard antagonizing him. But he really didn't care. But a glance over the man's shoulder showed Shaggy that the warehouse supervisor was coming out of the warehouse. Probably ready to start shouting again. Shaggy tried to time it just right as he stuck a finger up at the smug asshole. "Listen here, you ass, achoo." It was the fakest sneeze Shaggy had ever attempted, and judging by the man's demeanor, he hadn't fallen for it for a second. In fact, the man seemed prepared for some kind of attack. However, he hadn't been prepared for Shaggy's kind of attack. Shaggy jerked his head forward roughly, just as his target shifted colors. Shaggy caught a bit of gray as he felt his head collide with the man's chest. "Whoa. Hey Ralph, you okay? Holy shit. What did he do?" Shaggy tried to look aghast as he moved to help the guy stand back up. Granted, he wasn't moving quick and Dave and Wren weren't helping at all. "Oh man. I'm so sorry." Shaggy said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. I must be allergic to your cologne or something, man. Totally accident. The now gray metal-covered man glared up at Shaggy as he struggled to breathe through his bent metal chest. Several of his friends started shouting, and Shaggy was about to let them get a few shots in so he could claim self-defense. But the warehouse boss was suddenly screaming. All right, you bunch of bastards. Get back in here. There's work to do. CLA Rune. Ralph's been hurt. One of Ralph's cronies yelled. Shaggy joined in. Yeah. Sorry. It was my fault, I sneezed and headbutted the poor guy. Must have taken the wind out of him. Totally what happened, boss lady? Dave added. Dave, please stop helping. Ren whispered as they all made way for the furry woman. She pushed her way toward their little group and glared down at Ralph. Shaggy thought he saw her eyes widen slightly at the damage to the man's chest, but she rallied and bellowed again. Everyone back to work. Someone get into the office and get me an injury form. The rest of you get out of here. Not you, newbie. You stay right where you are. Shaggy grimaced as their little group broke up, and Ren and Dave walked back to the warehouse. Shaggy glanced around to make sure no one was watching and mouthed the word office at Ren. Ren nodded once and placed a large hand on Dave's shoulder. Dave waved at Shaggy and followed along. Shaggy smiled as he turned back toward his victim. Suppose you think you're clever, huh? Shaggy wiped the smile from his face and tried to look contrite. I don't know what you mean, man. I just sneezed. Although I am sorry about what happened. The woman's furry features scrunched up in disbelief. Shaggy tried to place her alien race, but he couldn't. She didn't look like any sort of animal. If anything, she looked like a normal, slightly burly woman. Just with fur all over her body. She towed Ralph's body as the man still wheezed, trying to get air into his collapsed chest. Should we get him to change back? Shaggy asked, trying to get the focus off of himself. You'd like that, wouldn't ya? It'd take care of your problem right quick. Shaggy just raised an eyebrow and the furry lady sighed. His chest is caved in. If he shifted back, it would still be caved in and then we'd really have a problem. Shaggy nodded in understanding and tried to look contrite again. Oh. Well again, I am so sorry. He was just going on about some union nonsense and things were about to get a little heated. About to? Yeah, but I wound up sneezing, and this happened. I would never start a fight on my first day. I just wanted to ask where he got off demanding that we be part of a union. The furry woman snorted again. Not surprising. Chow's boys can get a little territorial. So you knew this was going to happen? Shaggy asked, trying hard to keep the edge from his voice. The woman narrowed her eyes at him and looked ready to argue. But one of Ralph's friends came back. He was dragging another man, dressed in a lab coat. The doctor knelt down and placed both his hands on Ralph's chest. Pink energy flowed out of the doctor and into the still wheezing man. The furry boss lady snarled and waved Shaggy away. Get back to work, damn it. I've got to fill out the paperwork for this mess. Shaggy almost did a little dance as he nodded solemnly. Yes, ma'am. Shaggy turned and started fast walking back toward the warehouse. You and your friends might want to look for other employment. The woman shouted behind Shaggy, who turned. It'll be safer for everyone. Shaggy could see actual worry in the woman's eyes. So he took the warning for what it was and rushed back into the warehouse. He ignored the increased heat and glanced around. Immediately, he spotted Ren arguing loudly and flailing his massive arms around. Some of Ralph's little gang were all shouting back at the much bigger alien, but nothing seemed to be about to happen. It was mostly just posturing and chest pounding. Shaggy grinned as he spotted Dave exiting the boss's office. But his grin quickly fell as Dave waved a slim data slate at Shaggy and mouthed the words, I got it, grinning madly all the while. Shaggy waved his excitable friend down and rushed over just as the furry boss woman made her way back into the warehouse. Shaggy damn near had to jam the slim tablet up Dave's shirt and slap a hand on the talkative guy's face to keep Dave from blabbing. "What the hell are you lot doing? Get to work before I fire all of ya," the boss shouted as she made a beeline for her office. Shaggy half-dragged, half-carried Dave away from the squat little office. Once they were away, Dave tried to take out the tablet again, but Shaggy slapped the other man's hands and shook his head. Ren walked past them and raised an eyebrow in question. Shaggy nodded as he looked around. Assured no one was looking, he mouthed the words "after work." Ren nodded, and Dave groaned loudly. Shaggy raised an eyebrow. "Dude, this thing is hot against my abs. It's uncomfortable." Dave whined in a whisper. Shaggy had to stop himself from slapping his friend and merely waved him away. He wasn't sure what they had gotten from the office, but he hoped it would help. It looked like their short stint as warehouse workers were going to come to a violent end. Shaggy grinned. All this cloak and dagger shit was fun, but he really wanted to punch someone. Judging by the way the other workers were glaring at him, he figured he would get his chance soon enough. After several more hours of sweaty backbreaking work, and Shaggy was hot, annoyed, and ready to claw the eyes out of the next person to shoot him an ugly glare. After his lunchtime altercation with Ralph, he had several humans and aliens shoot him the stink eye. Or alien equivalent. Ren seemed to get a few surly looks as well, but Shaggy was sure his giant friend was a little more intimidating than him. Still, Shaggy put his head down and kept working, moving pallets into various trucks, going toward various sites. Shaggy briefly thought about asking where some of those trucks were going. But with Dave still in possession of the stolen tablet, they would find out eventually. Not to mention what Vlad and Slink were digging up in the Spiegel brothers' offices. So instead he busied himself marking and cataloging the smells of every bastard that looked at him sideways. Ralph still hadn't come back from the doctor's office, which seemed a little odd. Soon a loud whistle blew, and his day came to an abrupt end. Shaggy grunted and dropped the pallet jack he'd been dragging around. A few more surly looks in his direction made him grit his teeth and return the piece of equipment, but he flipped several people the bird as he did. "Making friends everywhere, huh?" Ren asked as he trudged next to Shaggy. Shaggy merely grunted as he took off his sweaty work shirt and sighed loudly. Just outside the warehouse, their furry boss was handing out envelopes to a few workers. Dave was chatting away at her, and their surly boss looked ready to decapitate the talkative mutant. Shaggy and Ren moved to grab their friend, but a group of people got in their way. Almost as one. Shaggy sighed as he mentally counted everyone in the group. There were 8 of them. All marked by Shaggy's scent ability. Meaning that at some point during the workday, they had shot him angry looks. Shaggy guessed they were fellow union workers like Ralph. The new short leader stepped forward. It was another alien. This one had the pale skin tone, but 4 eyes climbed up his forehead, each blinking separately at both Shaggy and Ren. Shaggy cracked his knuckles and got ready for a fight. Finally. He thought as he marched forward aggressively. We need you both at the meeting." The 4-eyed alien stammered, quickly backpedaling away from Shaggy. It took him a few seconds to register what had been said, but once Shaggy processed it, he stopped dead in his tracks. Ren, who had been a little more reluctant to fight in a company warehouse, blew out a tired breath and asked, "What meeting?" 4-eyes gulped as he stared at Shaggy's angry posture, but answered, "The union meeting. We have to get you guys to fill out the cards, and then you can be part of the union." "I don't think we'll be there," Ren interrupted. "Just let us know where." Shaggy snapped his head around so fast, he heard his neck pop in several places. He missed the alien union workers' directions as he shot his most incredulous look at Ren. The Paranadan ignored him and seemed to memorize the address he was given. Shaggy made a noise somewhere between a grunt and growl and stomped off. Dave was still bothering their boss, and Shaggy wanted to get out of the stifling warehouse. So then, the hero transforms into this, armored Avenger. Willing to fight all sorts of crime and, bad guys. He even has this sweet-ass motorcycle that he drives around on, fighting crime. And this is all thanks to some sort of alien belt thing? The boss asked, sounding weirdly entertained. Dave shook his head. Nah, not really. I mean, the belt helped. But it more awakened what was already within our hero. It also signaled to the belt's ancient enemy that a new hero had arisen? Exactly. Dave shouted excitedly. Shaggy stared at what was the oddest conversation he had ever heard. Neither Dave nor the boss had registered his approach, and Dave looked ready to expound further about a belt-clad, transforming hero. But Shaggy shook off his confusion and placed his hand on his friend's shoulder. Dude, we gotta meet the others. Dave's smile briefly fell, but he quickly replaced it as he nodded amicably. Ah, sure dude. I was just telling CLA Rune about my powers. Shaggy raised an eyebrow, but the furry alien woman, CLA Rune, chuckled as she said. No. I asked you about your powers and you exploded into some fanciful tale about an alien belt with body-morphing powers. Don't get me wrong, I have seen my fair share of alien tech, but nothing powerful enough to make a normie human, powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with an ancient alien race. Dave's smile widened. It was all just a precursor, Clar. Just the appetizer I was getting to my mutant abilities. Promise. Shaggy's brain stalled as CLA Rune smiled back at Dave. He couldn't figure out what made the dude so likable to people. The angry boss lady hadn't screamed at anyone in the past couple of minutes. In fact, she seemed generally happy to discuss what Shaggy was sure was an old show with Dave. Shaggy shook his head and tried to interject in the conversation again. Tell her later, my dude. Work's over. CLA Rune shot Shaggy an angry look, which he just shrugged at and waved toward an approaching Ren. We said we would meet up with our friends and talk about work. How it went, what we thought. You know? We did? Dave asked, clearly confused. Shaggy just nodded as Ren arrived and grabbed a money envelope from CLA Rune. Thank you very much, ma'am. It has been a fulfilling day. See you tomorrow. Ren said cheerfully as he pocketed the money envelope. Bullshit. CLA Rune grinned. You bastards were disruptive as hell at lunch. Granted, Ralph probably started it. But that's how some of those union guys are. Shaggy simply grunted as he tried to turn Dave toward the main office building of Spiegel Construction. Dave almost tripped on his own feet, but caught himself and waved goodbye to their surly warehouse boss. Bye, Clar. I'll tell you the rest of the story later. Shaggy rolled his eyes and kept walking as he flung his damp shirt over his shoulder. Even with the sun going down, he was still hot as hell. Thanks to his in-game stats and abilities, he was in way better shape than he was in real life. But a full day of picking up and moving pallets would make anyone sweat. They had just gotten to the front door when it swung open and a small stream of people came pouring out. They got plenty of odd looks as they waited for the stampede of office workers to stop. Everyone seemed extremely eager to leave, which Shaggy could understand. This manual labor stuff really wasn't for him. Hey! Shaggy suddenly shouted, surprising several people. Ignoring them, he slammed a fist into Ren's enormous arm. What the hell was all that about with the union shit? Ren turned and looked down at Shaggy before he sighed. It's another avenue of information. We could do with several up here. I feel that this is going to be a long job. Whoa. So you mean, like, I'm going to have to drive around again tomorrow? No bueno, dude. Okay, you can shut up. You weren't sweating all day in a hot-ass warehouse with various jackasses glaring at you all day. Ren sighed louder. Just ignore them. You broke their friend's chest. Shaggy grumbled incoherently and waved a hand. Bah. It was his own fault. We all knew where that shit was going. Same place this little meeting they want us to attend is going. It's going to be an ambush and we're going to have to fight our way out and probably get in trouble with another criminal organization. Aren't they, like, a union? You know, a group of people designed to fight for the rights of the workers? Dave questioned as the office doors closed shut. Pfft. Those were absolutely gangsters. Probably got the whole construction business under their purview. Shaggy said smugly. You've watched too many vids. Ren muttered as he scanned the slowly diminishing crowd of office workers. Shaggy wrenched the front door open and sighed as a blast of cool air hit his bare chest. Mark my words, they are going to jump us at that meeting. Fine. Then don't go. Dave followed them into the office building and past the main desk. Dude, you might have, like, anger issues. I'd look into that. Maybe take up a hobby, find something to help you mellow? Excuse me, the office is the new guy at the front desk started to say. Shaggy shot the guy an angry look and kept walking toward the door to the stairs. I have a hobby. It's smacking stupid people. Shaggy said as he turned his glare back to his destination. They had just made it to the door to the stairs when it swung open and a tired-looking Slink stepped out. He caught sight of all of them and smiled. But Shaggy didn't see Vlad. He gave the young boy a questioning look, but Slink moved toward a nearby water dispenser embedded into the wall. After a quick drink, Slink sighed. That was a long-ass, boring day. Really? Shaggy muttered, crossing his arms. That's so sad for you. Shaggy felt pain flare in the back of his head as Ren smacked him. Shut up already. We'll get you something to do later. Where's Vamps? Slink gulped down another drink of water before smiling. Upstairs. A victim of his own success. Shaggy couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. Stuck in a cubicle, huh? Oh yeah, poor pale bastard can file paperwork faster than most. Even those with multiple arms. Also, office politics probably dictated that he handle all the shit work. Huh. Sucks for him. Shaggy guffawed. Shaggy jumped a full 10 feet into the air, head slamming into the ceiling with a meaty thud. He felt the several minor cuts heal as he spun angrily on his vampire friend. Vlad didn't look any different after a long day at the office. Maybe a little pale, but he was a vampire. Shaggy blocked out the other's laughter as he reached for his friend's collar. Vlad merely smiled and waved toward the front door. Everyone left in the office chuckled as they made their way out of the foyer. Vlad gave a short wave to the receptionist. See you later, Jimmy. Have a good one. Shaggy saw Jimmy the receptionist try to hide his own mirth as he and his friends made it to the front door. It had been a good gag, and Shaggy appreciated the levity. But he really wanted to punch something now. He aimed a kick at Vlad's knee as they exited the building. There was a loud, satisfying pop as Vlad went down. His left leg could no longer support his weight. Damn mutt. Vlad yelled loudly as he tried to right himself using the building. Shaggy laughed as the others started shouting over each other. Ren and Slink seemed to think he went too far. But Dave just laughed good-naturedly. Soon enough, Vlad's leg healed, and they made their way toward the street. Shaggy was sure Vlad was going to strike back, but the nearby K-Tech guards probably stopped him from retaliating. Shaggy kept an eye out in case the guards did something. But they mostly gave them a quick once-over and left his group alone. Once out and across the street, Shaggy glanced left and right. Ren waved them westward down the street and the others followed. Shaggy groaned loudly as the sun set and cars passed them. We really need a car. You could go full wolf again and we could ride you. Slink said with mirth. Vlad and Dave smiled and looked and Shaggy expectantly. But he shook his head. Not happening. Besides, we don't need it. We aren't going very far. The union meeting is at an all-night diner down this road. Apparently, the union guys meet there some nights after work. Ren explained. We're going to a union meeting? Vlad questioned. Shaggy cackled and shook his head. No. We're going to an ambush. We got into it with a couple of crooked union guys and Ren went and made friends with them. 80% of that is in your head. Ren said. That guy was a little pushy, but the others seemed fine. This is going to be a nice quiet meeting where they explain their union and try to get us to join. Shaggy blew a raspberry at the gray alien, but said nothing. They continued down the sidewalk having idle conversations until Slink asked. Wait, so are we joining their union? I don't know about you guys, but my day sucked. I was an office gopher all damn day, and getting people their paperwork and coffee is not how I want to spend my time. Agreed. Vlad said. Please, you bastards don't know how good you had it. We were out there sweating in a hot warehouse while Dave here, Shaggy trailed off as he turned to look at Dave. Dave had his head down and was reading over a large data tablet. Shaggy grinned as he moved to look at what Dave was reading. Wait, this is the thing you pulled from Furry Lady's office, right? Okay, dude. Her name was Cla Rune, and she was a lovely person. But yes, this is what we stole. I copied over as much of her system as I could with the time I had. Looks like I got a bunch of their satellite locations and work sites. The others all stopped, and they all bent their heads over the tablet. Shaggy really couldn't make heads or tails of it. Except that it seemed to list addresses and shipment numbers. He almost jumped for joy. Ran and Vlad glared at him like he was an idiot as Slink carefully took the tablet from Dave. You remember that K-Tech is guarding some of these places, right? Vlad asked. Yeah, but... And you know, even if we stop some of these projects, it's not going to ruin Frank's rival. Ren added. Shaggy growled in his throat as the horrible realization that he was probably going to continue warehouse work weighed on him. Slink and Dave continued to pore over the tablet as Ren moved the group further along. Vlad just gave Shaggy a smug look before they got to the end of the block and turned the corner. Ren stopped after the corner and looked up the north-heading street. Even if the big guy didn't raise his hand and point at their destination, Shaggy could have probably guessed. The squat 3-story brick building didn't stick out that much. But the bright blue and red neon sign, emblazoned with the name Callahan's, lit up the darkening sky. Shaggy grinned as he pulled on his shirt. The sweaty stench of the shirt stung his nose, but he ignored it as the thought of the coming fight filled him with glee. Geez, maybe I do have a problem. Shaggy thought as they all started walking toward the diner. Shaggy cracked his knuckles and grinned at everyone. He could hear the sounds of carousing and the smell of food wafted from the building. He even could see several scent trails he had marked earlier in the day. Vlad and Ren gave him disapproving looks while Dave was smiling happily at the sounds of merriment coming from inside. Slink was still perusing the tablet. Shags, don't start shit, Vlad said warningly. Oh, shit's about to start. Shaggy grinned, but I'm going to let them start it. Ren sighed and pinched his horn with his massive fingers. Just don't kill anyone. Please. We don't want to spend our time up here running from police drones. Shaggy nodded absently as he shoved his way into the bar. The sounds of and smells of exhausted workers relaxing after a hard day's work ground to a halt as he and his friends marched their way in. Shaggy grinned. So tell me about this. Union. Thud. So then he tries that bullshit headbutt sneeze things. Ha ha ha. Thud. But it works. Caves my chest in like it was made of paper. Ha ha ha. Thud. Thud. Shags, could you please stop banging your head on the table? It's getting annoying. Vlad's voice echoed in Shaggy's ears. Shaggy glared up at his pale friend as he felt the bruise on his forehead healing. Ralph was on his 8th beer and had retold the story of Shaggy headbutting him 4 times. He couldn't believe it. These bastards really wanted to just talk about getting all of them signed on with the union. They were all just sitting around, shooting the shit and drinking beers. Shaggy had to do something with all that useless adrenaline. So, he was banging his head on the table. Dave was laughing it up at the bar, along with several other workers. Both from the warehouse and the office. Ren and Vlad were seated with him, Ralph, and a few others. Slink had slunk off into a corner and was reading Dave's stolen tablet. No one was bothering the kid, though. Mo was out and on the kid's shoulders, and no one seemed willing to approach a giant orange alien snake. Which Shaggy figured was for the best. Ralph burped loudly. So, what's he all upset about? He came in here looking like he wanted to rip someone's head off. Thud. Ren grinned at Shaggy as he slammed his head back into the wooden table. Vlad gave a chuckle as he answered. He was just expecting this to be a different kind of place. Hey! Callahan's is a great diner, man. Booze, tunes, and good people. What more could you want? Shaggy raised his head and reached for his mug of beer. He wasn't that far behind Ralph, but his werewolf metabolism still prevented him from feeling even a buzz. Long-ass boring workday, annoying coworkers, and now he had to sit with them and pretend to be social. Shaggy was pretty sure his fun VR MMO had become a waking nightmare. He huffed as Ralph seemed to remember what they were here for. The man had been starting and stopping his little union pitch since they had sat down. So Mr. Chow, have I told you about Mr. Chow? Several times. Shaggy muttered. Ran and Vlad gave him angry looks at his tone. Well, he's a nice old man, and he set up this union for the workers of various construction companies. Of course, the fees are different for powered or unpowered, but that's understandable. Shaggy almost slammed his head into the table again. The drunk bastard had been talking in circles since his fourth drink, and they had already gotten most of the information they could want. If it was up to him, it would be time to leave these drunken workers to their hangovers. But Ran and Vlad didn't seem willing to leave just yet. So Mr. Chow came over from San Francisco and started this workers' movements. There had been unions before, but Chow wanted to unite them into one, you see. Ralph was well into his third or fourth retelling of Joseph Chow's rise to power in Texas. Shaggy shot a pleading look at Ren and Vlad, but he was ignored, as they both seemed entirely wrapped in what the drunk man was saying. Shaggy sighed and stood abruptly. I'm going to check on the kid. Ren nodded amicably as Vlad waved for another round. The bartender nodded and went about filling more mugs. Shaggy got a glimpse of Dave speaking with a few men and women. They all seemed to be enamored with the guy. Shaggy couldn't make out what his friend was saying, but judging by the way Dave was gesticulating with his arms, he would bet it was something exciting. Shaggy had to push past a few of Dave's admirers, but soon he made it near the far wall and into Slink's little booth. The kid's sallow face was cast in an eerie light in the corner's darkness. Slink looked like a tired college kid going over his coursework for the semester and realizing he may have bitten off more than he could chew. Please tell me you have something? I'm going nuts over there. Shaggy pleaded. Slink snapped his head up in surprise and then grinned. What? Not used to whining and dining friends and possible contacts? Shaggy grunted as he fell into a chair. Ugh. Not my thing. I really want to punch something. Please tell me we have a target. Hate to say it, but I don't. Most of this is just shipments and tracking information. 200 pallets of wood to this address. 400 pallets of bricks to another. Nothing major, really. Besides, I don't think this little job is going to work out like we thought it would. What do you mean? Well, most of Spiegel Brothers' construction is done through the net. They bid on contracts, file orders, pay their workers, and monitor their operating cost throughout the office's cloud network. We could wreck a few work sites, but all that would cost them is money. Shaggy laughed. That's usually enough to wreck a company. If they keep losing money, they'll eventually go under. Slink waved the tablet around. You want to be up here for months? Undertown is still getting settled after Cog's invasion. But things will eventually settle. Once they do, our foundations need to be solid. We need to get this finished as soon as possible. So what's the play? Shaggy smiled at how Slink was coming into his own. The kid really had a knack for organization. All of this, Slink pointed at the tablet, is great. But we don't need it. We don't need to go at the company. We need to hit the man, and no, I don't mean literally. You take the fun out of everything. But my point is valid. Frank just wants us to ruin his competitor, so let's investigate the owner of Spiegel Brothers Construction. Not owners? Shaggy asked. Slink shook his head. Not that I can find. The company was started by a pair of brothers, but now it's run by a guy who's like their great whatever grandson. So we find that guy, invent or find some kind of scandal, and we're back underground within a week. Shaggy grinned and sat back in his chair. You really have fun with this stuff, don't ya? Well, I mean, yeah. This is all very interesting and kind of cool. Creative problem solving at its finest, you know? I guess. Shaggy shrugged. Slink rubbed his eyes and put the tablet back down on the table. The sun was well and truly down now. They were going to have to find a place to shack up at some point, and that 3 of the 5 of them couldn't drink or get drunk made coming here a moot point. At least for Shaggy. He was about to ask if they should grab the others and go when a boisterous laugh rang from the bar. Ha 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 ha. You are so funny, my dude. Dave shouted. It's not a joke. You grabbed my girlfriend's ass. We all saw it, an angry voice responded. Shaggy's blood spiked as he stood and looked toward the bar. Dave was leaned up against it, his mug of alcohol sloshing messily. A large ursine alien was leaned into Dave's personal space and pointing a black claw at the shorter man. A woman was at the bear-like alien's shoulder, whispering something in his ear as she tried to pull him away from Dave. Shaggy made his way over as Dave argued with the large bear man. Look, guy, we were having a fun time. I didn't mean to touch her ass, if I did at all. So let's all calm down and go back to drinking and having fun. Shaggy could see Ren and Vlad standing at their table as well, to get a better view of what was going on. Ralph, however, seemed slumped in his chair. That made Shaggy raise an eyebrow, but he continued toward the bar and started pushing various patrons out of his way. The bearman's angry voice spoke up again and Shaggy was sure he could hear some slurring in the alien's speech. Shaggy made it to the bar, just as Dave set his mug down and glared up at the bear. Okay, my guy. I have no problem with you or her. But I will bet that you angrily shouting about your girlfriend like she's property is a sure way to end a relationship. Fuck you, the bear alien shouted. He doesn't mean nothing by it. He's just drunk. The bear alien's girlfriend said. Although she looked a little miffed at what her boyfriend had said. At least to Shaggy. I get that. Whatever goes on between you two is between both of you. But if he brings it here, he ain't going to be happy. Dave said. Nah. No need for that, we'll just go. Won't we, baby? The girlfriend continued to try to drag her irate boyfriend away as he stared down at Dave. For a moment, Shaggy thought everything was going to de-escalate. But suddenly the bearman's arm swung backward angrily, and the girlfriend went flying. Shaggy saw a flash of black in his peripheral vision as Vlad caught the poor woman. He was about to rush the alien, but Dave was suddenly armored and moving. Dave slammed his blue armored fist into the bearman's knee. As the bear went down, Dave backed up and brought his own knee into the man's ursine snout. Dave's opponent feebly tried to swing his enormous arms, but Dave sidestepped and grabbed the guy's head. Shaggy watched as Dave slammed the ursine alien's head into the bar and then let go. The bearman collapsed like a sack of potatoes, and everyone held their breath. Shaggy moved over and monitored the guy as Dave turned and addressed the bartender. Call the police and an ambulance. Whoa. Where did you get that? Alarmed by Dave's tone, Shaggy spun and caught sight of the diner's bartender. The portly human was wielding what looked like a silver alien shotgun. Blue and red lines ran up and down the dual-barreled monstrosity, and he was holding it, ready to defend himself. Shaggy, Dave, and everyone else raised their hands. Afraid of what would happen next. It's fine, cough, no need to get the cops involved, cough, cough. Came a voice from behind everyone. Shaggy turned to see Vlad helping the bear alien's girlfriend walk forward. She had a large bruise on her cheek and she looked appropriately punch-drunk. He just hit you. Dave said incredulously. He was drunk, the woman said defensively. And you riled him up even more. Shaggy sighed as he watched the woman slowly approach her unconscious alien boyfriend. Judging from her tone, this was obviously not the first time the woman had been hit. She sounded used to defending her drunken boyfriend. As he glanced around the room, he saw several pitying faces, which almost confirmed his thoughts. Dave looked outright pissed. That's no reason to do what he did. He shouted. Please. The woman pleaded. Just let it be. I'll be all right. Dave looked ready to argue, but the sound of an unfamiliar voice halted everything. Yes sir, officer. That's Callahan's bar. I'll make sure no one leaves. Everyone turned back to the bartender to see the portly shotgun-wielding man close out a hollow communication screen. He turned back to everyone and set his alien weapon on the counter. Y'all heard me. No one leaves until the cops get here. Myron. The bear's girlfriend whined. Myron's voice became a whisper and Shaggy could hear the self-hatred in his tone. Dave's face was ecstatic, and Vlad and Ren had moved up. Even Slink was now standing in the crowd, a wide-eyed and surprised look on his face. Shaggy moved over to his friends and waved for Dave and Slink to join them. They all stepped away from the crowd, as a few people were consoling Janet. Shaggy even saw a few people kick the unconscious Ursine alien. Well, that turned out well. Shaggy said. Did it? Vlad asked, sounding annoyed. Dave glared at the vampire. What? Did you want the guy to get away with it? He was clearly beating his girlfriend. Dave's raised voice drew a couple of stares, and Ren waved a massive hand to calm down their usually happy friend. No, Dave. None of us want what was going on to continue. In fact, if they hadn't called the police, I would have suggested we follow the two and take care of the problem ourselves. Slink grinned. Careful. That's almost hero-like. Shaggy snorted. Pfft. We're villains, not monsters. I would have happily gutted the bastard and been done with him. So maybe vigilante-like? Slink asked. Vlad growled. Y'all are missing the damn problem. What? Dave asked, looking confused. We're villains. Ren said simply. Yeah. So? Dave asked, not getting it as the problem dawned on Shaggy. We're villains that have escaped prison, Vlad hissed quietly, and the cops are on their way. Dave's eyes went large as Slink looked worried. Shaggy sighed. So let me see if I understand the plan. He whispered as their group of friends huddled in a far corner of the diner. We hand over our brand new work IDs, which have our fake identities on them. Some of us didn't use fake identities, dude. Dave complained. Ren groaned. Again. Why would you use your real name? Dave just crossed his arms and looked sullen as Shaggy continued. Then we explain what we saw, with the asshole bear and the woman. All the while, we pray to the various video game gods that they don't run our credentials or have any sort of facial recognition. It was Vlad's turn to sigh this time. Like I said, they aren't going to send a lot of cops out for a domestic violence call. We'll get a couple of uniforms and maybe an ambulance. So we play along for a bit, then announce that we have to get going. Yeah. We have to make sure our new friend and fellow union member, Ralph, gets home okay, Ren said, waving a massive gray hand at the currently unconscious Ralph. I can't believe you guys knocked him out. Slink grinned. Vlad shrugged. We were going to need a place to stay tonight. We figured we could invade the jerkwad's place. Also, he has a car parked around the corner, apparently. Shaggy glanced over at the crowd of NPCs, who were all quietly whispering near the front door to the diner. Janet and her abusive alien boyfriend had been separated, and the bartender was keeping an eye on everyone. The weird alien shotgun seemed to pulse with power as Shaggy got a good look at it. He guessed it was an energy weapon. Whatever it did, it was enough to make everyone in the bar listen to the portly diner owner. You realize Dave is going to be questioned the most, right? Since he's the one that knocked out the bear guy. Slink said. Shaggy nodded agreement, but said. Yeah, but he's also one of the few of us who's not an escaped prisoner. Ren raised a hand up and Dave immediately slapped him 5. The pair of them were getting a little smug about not having visited the game's prison system. Shaggy grunted, annoyed, but he couldn't disagree. Being an escaped prisoner had made some of their dealings topside somewhat annoying. Shaggy wondered how long the local PD would spend looking for them. It had been well over a week since he, Vlad, and Slink had made a break for it. They weren't even classified as dangerous criminals. Shaggy had been tossed into low-powered D-block because he was taken down by a non-powered super. Vlad was in there because he was captured while in his blood stupor. Slink had tried to kill his schoolmates using just his fist. They were all low-tier offenders. Maybe they weren't even looking for them anymore. Shaggy was about to mention this when red and blue lights lit up the front of the diner. Everyone in the bar started backing away from the front door. Janet was hoisted up by a pair of people and walked toward the door. Her unconscious boyfriend was dragged unceremoniously by Myron. Shaggy saw Dave take a few steps away from their group. They had all decided that, if possible, they should distance themselves. At least partially. Shaggy wasn't sure how that was going to work out, but he was more than willing to try. 3 humanoids marched their way into the bar and silence fell. A yellow and red alien woman immediately spotted Janet and walked over, pulling a small tablet from her pocket. The largest of the cops, a red demon-looking guy, had posted up near the front door and was eyeballing everyone in the room. Finally, the lone human of their group was a blonde, handsome man who smiled warmly at everyone as he took in the room. Shaggy instantly hated him. "Good evening, everyone," the man said. "I am Officer Hawthorne. My partners are Officers Mickle and Zelthub. I will take your statements one by one, while Zelthub will clear everyone as they leave." Everyone nodded dumbly, and Shaggy sent a worried look at Vlad. But the vampire was currently pretending to shake Ralph awake. But according to Ren, he had knocked the guy pretty hard. Shaggy was pretty sure Ralph would not wake for a while. Slink was digging in his pockets for his employee ID, and Shaggy figured he should do the same. "So I am going to need everyone involved with the incident to step forward, and I'll take your statements one at a time. If you were not a part of the altercation, I ask for your patience so we can get everything sorted out." "How long is that going to take?" a worried voice called from the mass of people at the bar. "As long as it takes," Officer Zelthub said from his spot near the door. Officer Hawthorne shot his compatriot a withering look. But eventually he nodded. He's not wrong. This could take a while. So I ask that everyone settle in and we'll try to get you home as soon as possible. Shaggy slumped into a chair as there were voices of annoyed agreement filled the bar. Dave moved closer to the cops and waited to tell his story. Slink joined Shaggy at his table and worriedly played with his employee ID. Shaggy quickly pulled out his and watched the officers work. Zelthub seemed to have closed his eyes and was simply standing near the front door. Mickle was taking a crying Janet's statement and checking the poor woman for visible wounds. Although Shaggy thought the large-ass welt on the girl's face would have been enough evidence. Now that the cops were involved, Janet seemed way more willing to talk. Shaggy couldn't hear her because of all the patrons' indistinct murmurs, but she looked like a person unburdening themselves. He could practically smell her relief in the air. His taste for scents seemed to be improving. He could even smell the annoyance on a few people. In fact, someone smelled. "Someone's about to do something stupid," Shaggy whispered to Slink. The pale kid's eyes widened as he started looking around. "What do you mean?" Shaggy tapped his nose. "Fear. Someone's afraid and it's getting stronger." Shaggy kept scanning the diner as he tried to trace where the scent was coming from. The blue and yellow scent trails in the air crisscrossed everywhere. But he couldn't pinpoint where the fear was coming from. He was about to get up and surreptitiously search for it, but the guy outed himself. One member of the kitchen staff made a mad dash toward the back of the room. Shaggy guessed there was a back door or something around the corner near the kitchen. But the poor server barely made it 4 steps when reddish-black bands formed around his torso and lifted him into the air. The young human-looking server started to scream and struggle. Shaggy searched for the source of the bands and found Zelthub moving toward the young server. Hand outstretched. He guessed the demon guy was some kind of mage or something. Everyone stopped and stared as Zelthub spun the still struggling man upside down. Hawthorne and Mickle ignored their partner and tried to get everyone back on track. "Let the sorcerer work, folks," Hawthorne said, as he tried to get Myron talking again. But Myron wasn't paying attention anymore. "Chuli? What did you do, son?" Chuli quickly silenced himself and Shaggy grimaced. Poor dude just gave himself away. He was clearly hiding something in the diner, and now that the police were here, he had flipped and tried to flee. Zelthub moved his face nose to nose with the upside-down Chuli and sniffed. He snorted as he shook his head and righted the server. "Glow addict. He probably has a stash somewhere," Zelthub said over his shoulder. Hawthorne rubbed his eyes. "Priority is the DV call. We can search the place when we finish taking statements. Or this punk can just tell me where his drugs are?" Zelthub growled. Chuli remained tight-lipped and continued to struggle against his magical bonds. Shaggy sighed as he figured they would have to wait even longer to get out of here. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes, but a tap on his arm brought him around. Vlad was back at their table, and he was mouthing something. "Help." Shaggy raised an eyebrow, but Vlad just said the word again and pointed over his shoulder at Zelthub and Chuli. Myron was back to giving his statement and Janet was now alone. Mickle had moved toward the entrance and opened the door for a short man in white robes to come in. The man had a large red cross emblazoned on his robes, and Shaggy guessed that was the paramedic or magical equivalent. Vlad waved a hand to get Shaggy's attention and mouthed the word help again. Shaggy sighed and gave his vampire friend an incredulous look. But Vlad seemed adamant as he repeated the word for a 4th time. Shaggy growled under his breath and got up. The movement drew a look from Hawthorne, but the blonde cop continued to take Myron's statement. Shaggy took a large whiff of the room and he got a heavy dose of annoyance coming from practically everyone, even the cops. As he approached Zelthub, the big demon man didn't even turn to look at him. "I'm going to have to ask you to back away, citizen. We don't know what this kid is capable of or if he has any powers. Glow can do some messed up stuff to a person's head." Shaggy stopped moving and raised both his hands, palms up. "Just looking to help." Zelthub finally turned and raised an eyebrow. "You a registered soup?" Shaggy noted the less than civil way the demon cop said that and shook his head. Pointing to his nose, he said, "No, but my senses are pretty good. If I can get a whiff of what you're looking for, I could probably find it." "Is that safe?" Mickle called from her spot near the front door. She had moved halfway between the door and Janet, trying to watch both. "Should be fine," Zelthub called. "Glow has to be injected, so sniffing won't cause any adverse effects." "Are you looking to be a soup?" Shaggy couldn't hide a chuckle. "Hell no. I just want to get home as fast as possible. Waiting for you guys to overturn the place doesn't sound like fun." Zelthub considered it, but Hawthorne gave his final word. "Let him try, Zell. We can get these people out of here quickly. Just monitor everything and make sure he touches nothing." Shaggy saw that Dave was now giving his own statement, with Janet standing nearby. Zelthub shot Shaggy a look, but seemed to agree with his partner. Chuli's floating form was brought closer to Shaggy, and the surly server gave him the ugliest of looks. Shaggy ignored the kid as he moved slightly closer and took a huge whiff. Bleg. Shaggy coughed and moved back as the smell of sulfur and fear assaulted his nose. "Are you okay?" Zelthub asked, actually sounding concerned. Shaggy bleakly registered that Chuli's body was moved away as he tried to blink the water from his eyes. Yeah. I'm fine. but man, that shit stinks. Holy hell. What the hell is that? Zelthub chuckled darkly. Synthesized demon blood cut with a bit of magic. Supposedly a real good high, but the shit turns your blood to acid and rubs your nervous system raw. Well, it would if anyone could survive over 6 doses of the stuff. The paranoia will have you doing something stupid long before it gets to that stage, though. Shaggy rubbed his eyes and nodded understandingly. He kind of got why Ren was so anti-drug. If magical drugs smelt like that, Shaggy wasn't sure he wanted any part of them either. He was drawn out of his thoughts by Zelthub asking him a question. Did you get what you needed? Huh? Shaggy asked, not understanding. But then he realized, and he blearily nodded. Oh yeah, give me a second. I just have to find the trail. Shaggy took another large whiff of the room and quickly tried to gray out all the other scents. Normally, the scents he could see were from enemies or fellow humanoids. Now he was trying to track a particular scent through the air. Luckily, the scent of bad eggs was an easy one to find. Although some of that smell was coming from Officer Zelthub. Which Shaggy figured made sense if the drug was made from demon blood. Shaggy circled the room a little under the watchful eye of Zelthub. Every few seconds, he would take another sniff and move closer and closer toward the scent. Zelthub and Chuli following him around hardly helped, but he didn't want to tell the officer to back off. So he concentrated as best he could until he followed the scent toward the kitchen. But right before the door, the scent veered off and went down a hallway. Shaggy followed it down the hallway and into the unisex bathroom the diner had. Zelthub used Chuli's magically wrapped body to push his way in. Shaggy had to shake off the pungent smell of various chemical cleaners. The bathroom smelled like it had just been cleaned, and the smell of the chemicals was doing a good job of masking the scent. Shaggy circled the room several times before he sighed loudly. Nothing? Zelthub's gravely voice asked. Shaggy shook his head. It's in here. But whatever cleaning chemicals they use are blocking the scent. Zelthub spun Chuli around and eyed the oddly quiet drug addict. Well? Want to make my life easier and tell us where your stash is? Either way, this isn't good for you. Shaggy could admire the staunch resistance the kid was showing. But he also really wanted this night to be over. So, as Zelthub continued to question and cajole his suspect, Shaggy checked the room, stall by stall. He even got his nose close to a few standing urinals. Which had been fairly unpleasant, even with the smell of cleaners in the air. Shaggy was about to check the final bathroom stall when Chuli lost his already limited cool. No. 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 The skinny server twisted this way and that in the officer's magical grip. Zelthub grinned as he nodded to Shaggy. Looks like you were getting close. Why don't you dash? Bam. Suddenly, Shaggy was deaf and blind. His skin burned and his nostrils were filled with the horrible stench of sulfur. His vision was obscured with gray smoke and a light blue glow seemed to shine dimly in his vision. He felt a warm viscous liquid coat his arms and chest as he tried to get his hearing and vision back. Sound came back first, but it helped nothing. Low moaning and stifled shouts came from somewhere in front of him. He could feel a prickling sensation on his arms and legs. As his vision came back, Shaggy saw that he was surrounded by a thin layer of gray smoke. The light blue glow was actually an eerie blue flame that coated the bathroom and the front of his body. He could just make out the sight of Zelthub's black boot in the gray smoke. But Chuli was nowhere to be seen. Ugh. Cough. You okay? Zelthub's voice shouted from the smoke. But before Shaggy could answer, a stampede of footsteps came rushing through the bathroom door. Hawthorne and Mickle were suddenly standing there, service pistols raised and checking for threats. Shaggy raised his hands slowly and moved down to his knees to present the smallest and most non-threatening image he could. Zelthub seemed to understand what was going on as he quickly shouted his partners down. It's clear. We're clear. Punk detonated. He must have been an addict for a longer period than I had guessed. Shaggy's hands dropped as he tried to work out what that sentence meant. What do you mean, he detonated? Hawthorne sighed loudly as he holstered his sidearm. Mickle continued to search the restroom as the blonde cop explained. Sometimes if a glow addict has taken enough of the stuff, they can explode when they are in a highly emotional state. It turns their blood into liquid fire and they pop like a damn balloon. Shaggy glanced down and realized that his clothes were still on fire and they were still burning. So he rapidly put himself out with his hands. Zelthub got to his feet as Mickle finished her search of the bathroom. Shaggy got the last of the flames out and was lamenting the loss of another shirt when Zelthub asked. Whoa. Are you okay? Shaggy looked around and then down at himself, confused. Looks like he's fine to me. Mickle chuckled dryly. You sure you're not a soup? Hawthorne asked. Shaggy tried to figure out what they were talking about and then he realized his regeneration was quickly sorting out all of his injuries. He was literally healing right in front of him. It must have looked a little freaky to see a grown man heal from burns and like that. Then again, Zelthub was completely fine, too. So what was the deal? Finally, Shaggy shrugged. What do you mean? Zelthub raised an eyebrow and waved his head at Shaggy's body. Well, for one, you seem completely fine after getting blown up. So do you. Shaggy interrupted. Zelthub nodded, but continued. Fair. But you also seem to absorb the burning blood. Shaggy raised his own eyebrow as he glanced down at his body. Most of the flames had already been put out and he could feel his healing slowly going to work on the bruises from the explosion. But he didn't see any burnt skin. Which was a new one. Had he unlocked some kind of weird inflammable ability? Or maybe his dermal plating made him more resistant to fire. Shaggy shrugged his shoulders and was about to brush it off as a notification window popped into his face. Man, did he hate those things. But a quick read-through of the blue translucent window made his eyes bug out. That was most definitely new one. Demon touched. Zhang, the god of the blood realm, has set his blessing upon you. Your own powers will be augmented with a small portion of the blood god's power. How this power manifests is infinite, but it comes with a sacred duty. A duty set forth to you by Zhang themselves. If you do not perform the sacred task within the allotted time frame, Zhang will take back their blessing. They may even curse you, but should you succeed, then Zhang may increase their blessing. Demon blood absorbed. Werewolf form augmented. Sacred duty, kill the abomination, Cog, and banish him to the blood realm for his slight against the blood god. Time frame, 2 months. You are bullshit. Vlad said slowly, and only slightly angrily. Shaggy just grinned as he relaxed in Ralph's cramped back seat. He was squashed back there with Slink. Dave was driving, and Vlad had stolen the passenger seat. Ren was riding in the bed of Ralph's massive truck. With an unconscious Ralph. The massive, red hover truck hummed quietly as Dave eased the big vehicle down the street. It would have been pretty nice if it wasn't for the lack of legroom in the back seat. Seriously. You go into a restroom in search of drugs and activate some weird blood power quest line? What the hell? It's utter bullshit. Slink sighed. Well, he went to that blood realm. Remember? When Cog killed him. Nice of you to remember, Slink. Shaggy grinned, readjusting his legs. But, yeah. I'm willing to bet it had something to do with Cog's weird magical death curse thing. He obviously pissed off some AI deity in the game and since I was the only other person there, I got god-slapped. But why did it activate now? You are always covered in blood of some kind. Hell, you've sliced through more space vamps and humans than any of us, Dave asked as he turned the truck northward. Shaggy shrugged. Who knows? Maybe it had to be demon blood? Or magically enhanced blood? All I know is that it augmented my werewolf form. Whatever that means. Can't you shift and find out? Pfft. Last time I shifted in the city, we got chased by the rainbow cavalcade of soups. I don't want to try that again. The rainbow what? Dave called over his shoulder. Long story. Which I might have told already. But anyway, the point is, I'll find out what it means later. For now, we need to decide how we want to proceed. Sorry, Shags. But we really have to stick with this current job. Vlad stated simply. Shaggy was about to argue, but Slink tapped his arm. How about we wait until we can all talk? Doesn't seem right to have this conversation while Ren is in the truck bed. Slink pointed out the back window at their 8-foot friend. The giant rhino man was seated in the bed with a steadying hand on Ralph's prone body. The hover truck had little in the way of suspension, but with the way Dave was taking the turns, Ralph's body would probably roll. Shaggy grunted and nodded. Fine. But where are we even going? Ralph's place? Just following the GPS to home, dude. Dave said. Yeah, Vlad said, turning back around in his seat. Ralph's got an apartment we can squat in. At least for tonight. Sounds good. But do we know if he has any roommates? Anyone who could try to stop us? Also, why not just kill Ralph and take his apartment? Shaggy and Vlad turned to look at Slink. The casual way the kid mentioned killing someone was alarming. Hey. He's an NPC. We could just gank him and crash at his place. Shaggy sighed. Then when he doesn't show up to work or if the cops stop by to get his statement about what happened tonight. Slink waved his hand dismissively. They bought our story. Those cops didn't even scan us after the bathroom exploded. We just gave our statements and they let us out. Why would they worry about some guy who was drunk through most of the altercation? You want to risk it? Vlad asked over his shoulder. Besides, I'm not good at killing some innocent dude. Dave added. They're not real. Slink grumbled. Yeah, but the consequences are. Multiple people saw us dragging Ralph out of the bar. We took his car, and a lot of his coworkers saw it. We don't need the heat. Slink looked thoughtful, but remained quiet. Shaggy turned in his seat and looked out the window, trying to ignore his aching legs. The dark Austin suburbs were lit up with various street lamps, and he could just make out the outline of buildings as they drove past. Outside of downtown Austin, the buildings were less steel and glass and more brick and mortar. Their current street was an odd mix of apartments and mom-and-pop stores. Or what used to be mom-and-pop stores. Man. Everything is closed. Shaggy muttered. It's 2 a.m. Vlad said, confused. No. I mean, there are a lot of stores closed permanently. He pointed a finger out the window at a small building with border-up windows. Slink shrugged. Small business come and go. Shaggy shrugged back and leaned back in his seat again. It just seemed odd to him. So many businesses shut down this close to downtown Austin? It made little sense, but maybe with the recent COG attack, they had left the city completely. Shaggy shook the thought from his head and tried to think of a way to find COG. The supervillain was probably down in his lair, inventing more monstrous robots again. Shaggy still remembered the entrance he, Ephemera, and Slink had used. But getting captured again didn't seem like a good idea. Also, who even knew if the old bastard was still down there? For all Shaggy knew, he could march down into the sewers and find an empty set of tunnels. Although that brought up another problem. Even if he convinced the others to join him in attacking COG, what were 5 players going to do against a magically enhanced technopath and his army of robots? It would be suicide. Sure, he had done fairly well for himself a while back, but he had still been grayed out by the old codger's bots. They were going to need their own army. He briefly thought about putting their burgeoning gang up against the Mad Super. But he dismissed that idea immediately. He sighed as he realized he was going to have to organize a raid. He hated managing all that crap. Gamers were a fine group, but get them talking about loot distribution and creative problem solving and they'll talk your ear off. Shaggy bit his lip and opened up the in-game web browser and went to the game's forums. COG was still a big topic of discussion. At least for the Texas-based players. Some were calling it the first in-game event. A supervillain just went on a rampage with a bunch of magically enhanced robots. Of course, the players in Undertown bragged about how they fought off an army of robots. But photos of the attack were ridiculed and answered with screenshots of what had happened topside. Shaggy almost whistled out loud. Giant silver robots the size of skyscrapers went man-roboto with flying soups. Panther-like robots stalked the streets as registered soups got civilians to safety. Robot men with purple magical on their fists marched through the streets. Shaggy thought they had gotten off light in Undertown. Some of COG's new stuff looked downright insane. He continued to look through the forums for the next couple of minutes until they arrived at a rectangular brick building about 6 stories high. "This seems to be the place, dudes," Dave said. The truck bounced a bit as Ren hopped out of the bed and stretched his legs. Ralph tucked under one arm. Shaggy and the others got out as well. Shaggy popped his knees and stretched his back. He was about to complain, but he kept it to himself. They had bigger things to discuss tonight. "So, which apartment is Ralph's?" Dave asked. Vlad put a finger to his head and thought, but it was Ren who answered. "Top floor. Suite 616. "This place has a suite?" Slink asked incredulously. Shaggy agreed with the boy. The red building looked like your average apartment complex. Complete with a keycard entry and bulletproof glass doors. Vlad and Ren's only response was to shrug and move toward the building, followed closely by Shaggy and the others. A quick pat down of Ralph produced the plastic entry key, and they were into the building and up the stairs in no time. The 6th floor was one wide hallway with white linoleum floors. Plants Shaggy was sure were plastic dotted the hallway at odd intervals, and 2 doors were embedded into either side of the hallway. Their odd group quietly stepped up to the door and used Ralph's keycard again. What met them as they entered made all of them stop in the doorway. Mouths agape. "Oh, he is definitely a criminal," Slink said as they all stared into the large living room. "No shit," Vlad said. Shaggy stepped forward first, awed by both the apartment's size and the furniture Ralph had decorated with. The floors were carpeted in an avocado green shag carpet, then ran from the living all the way past the kitchen and out of sight toward the back of the apartment. A set of zebra print couches and love seats bracketed a glass coffee table. The piece de resistance for Shaggy was the large ostentatious chandelier decorating the large vaulted ceiling. "This dude has way too much money," Ren said as a disgusted look crossed his face. "Do you think there's, like, some here?" Dave asked idly, as they shut the hallway door and slowly looked around the living room. Everyone froze at the thought and Shaggy caught eyes with everyone. There was a solid thump as Ren dropped Ralph and their party split up to investigate the apartment. What followed was possibly the world's quietest hurricane. Careful to not wake up any neighbors or the apartment's owner, Shaggy and the others went room to room, searching for any loot. A couple of frantic minutes later and they had found nothing of note. Ralph seemed to spend what little money he earned on various bits of horrible furniture. Shaggy and the others agreed to give the place another search later and returned to the living room. Shaggy saw Slink and Vlad idly kick Ralph's body as they walked past. The promise of loot making them slightly salty. "Okay, so, we have a place for the night. We crashing here and then what?" Shaggy asked as he threw himself into Ralph's ugly sofa. "Then we go back to work tomorrow and try to find Boss Spiegel," Slink said. "All we have to do is find our target and ruin the man." Ren raised a large hand. "What about Shaggy's quest for that blood god? Shouldn't we look into that? I mean, 2 months is a long time, but I got to think helping a literally god would bring some benefits." "Agreed," Shaggy said, smiling at his friend. "But I think we are going to have to wait." Vlad raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "Well, for one, we have to attack someone with a veritable army of robots. Then we have to figure out a way to banish Cog to the blood realm. I don't know how to do that, and I doubt any of you do. Hey, Dave said, offended. I totally could know how to do that. Do you? No. Vlad shrugged. I met a few in Undertown. We could start there? Yeah, it's something to look into. But for now, let's focus on the Spiegel job. What do we know about the owner of Spiegel Brothers Construction? Drew Spiegel is 54 years old, lives somewhere in the Barton Creek, and he is, by all accounts on the net, a feckless layabout. Slink rattled off. Shaggy and the others stared before Shaggy chuckled. Hee hee hee. Well damn, kid. How long do you need to get his address? Slink scratched the back of his head. This is all the shit you can find on the net. We still need to track him down, and then we need to find some dirt on him. Then we can ruin him and, hopefully, his company. That sounds good. So tomorrow, or later today, as it were. One of us can head out there and do some recon. The rest of us will maintain our covers as office workers. Vlad said. Shaggy's hand jumped into the air. Dibs on scouting. Ralph gave a snort and rolled over on the floor. But the others just stared at Shaggy. I was thinking Dave could do it. He is the one the drones won't care about. Shaggy shook his head. That will not work. Dave has already daved himself into everyone's hearts down at the warehouse. Not sure I like that. I am a verb dude. My point is people are going to notice if you are gone. I may have caused a minor disturbance. You caved a man's chest in. Ren interrupted. But I won't be missed. Shaggy finished, carefully ignoring Ren's interruption. Slink sighed. I hate that he's right. Ren could do it too, but a large rhino alien walking through Barton Creek. You would stick out. Vlad hissed, annoyed. What about me? I'm not a verb. Dave mumbled. You're the office's new golden child. You go missing and someone's going to pitch a fit. Slink said. Then you go with him. Shaggy threw up his hands. Why does anyone need to go with me? I can handle a little scouting. Ren and Vlad shared a look, then Ren said calmly. You have a habit of getting into trouble. Which is fine. Vlad said. But we all want this over with quickly, and Slink is a proper scout with his snakes. I guess that makes sense. Vlad clapped his hands, and Ralph snorted again. So we are all in agreement. 3 of us will go back to office work and Slink and the Wolfie Trouble Magnet will go investigate our target. We can all meet back here after work. Woo. Hey, what are y'all doing in my apartment? Came a voice from the floor. They all turned to see a bleary-eyed Ralph trying to struggle to his feet. Ren raised his enormous fists and bopped the hungover worker. Ralph crumbled to the floor, and everyone sighed. We also need to do something about Ralph. We can say that we dropped him off at home and haven't seen him since, Vlad said. We could just tie him up and leave him here. Shaggy said. Dudes. Let's just go to work with him in the morning. We can, tell him he gave us a place to crash and it'll all be good. Shaggy and the others glanced at each other. Eventually, they nodded, and Dave smiled. They had a plan of attack and Shaggy was ecstatic that he wouldn't have to go back to the warehouse. Instead, he was going to travel to Barton Creek with the kid and do some spying. Now that was the type of gaming he wanted to do. A thought flitted through Shaggy's brain and he voiced it immediately. Dibs on the bed. Oh, hell no. Not happening. We should draw straws. Seriously, these hoodies are unnecessary. Shaggy groused as they walked down the hot sidewalk. His and Slink's attire drew several stares as they both pulled at their collars. It was a hot Texas morning and wearing the bulky clothes they had borrowed from Ralph's home wasn't helping things. Shaggy felt like he was stewing in the bigger man's oversized hoodie. Yeah, dude. They are. We don't want our faces showing for some random drone to pick up. Shaggy scratched his head. We haven't seen a damn drone since we left the apartment this morning. They had set out early, both to avoid dealing with an irate Ralph and to start the long walk to Barton Creek. It was going to be a 2-hour-long walk and Shaggy wanted to get going as soon as possible. Of course, then they got lost. MAO was supposed to be a decent replication of modern-day Austin, but with some changes here and there. So Shaggy's normal knowledge of the Rollingwood area was thrown out the window when he noticed the odd building out of place. Doesn't matter. We still need to be careful. We've already wasted a lot of time. Slink said, sidestepping an alien woman. Shaggy growled under his breath. I didn't know that the game had changed road names. I thought the recreation was supposed to be one-to-one. Slink merely shrugged and ducked his head. Shaggy had gotten them back on track, or at least headed in the right direction. But Slink was right. The longer they were in the open, the more likely it would be that they'd be spotted. The main concentration of drones seemed to still be in downtown Austin. But, knowing their luck, Shaggy wouldn't have been surprised if they found a straggler somewhere. He sidestepped another alien walking down their crowded sidewalk and sighed. Many shops and restaurants dotted the street they were on, and they seemed to be busy, despite the early hour. Not only were cars zooming down the streets and skylanes, but pedestrians filled the sidewalks, all going about their business. Shaggy hoped they would provide suitable cover if they were spotted, but not for the first time. He thought about stealing a car. Multiple vehicles of both the hover and rolling variety filled the streets as people went to work or stopped at the shops. Shaggy was just turning to Slink to plead his case again, when he spotted a group of leather-clad men and women. They were moving with purpose toward the man loading his truck outside a hardware store. Shaggy grit his teeth as he saw the lead thug pull a metal pipe and deck the poor man. He felt Slink stop beside him, along with several other onlookers, as the thugs began to hoot and holler. Shaggy couldn't make out what the lead thug was saying, but the man was gesticulating with his pipe as his victim cradled his head. Do we help? Slink hissed through his teeth. Hell no, Shaggy whispered back. Some hero will come deal with it. But maybe we can grab a car while people are playing looky-loo. Slink sighed. Again. Do you know how to hotwire or hack a car? 'Cause otherwise you're barking up the wrong tree. Oh, hi. Thud. Another dull sound rang out as the lead punk slammed his weapon into the prone man. His buddies still shouting and egging him on. Shaggy figured they had mere seconds before some soup showed up. So he set about enacting his plan. First, he needed a target, but finding one in the throng of onlookers was pretty easy. As he spotted a lanky purple alien in a gray business suit, Shaggy heard the whirring of a nearby drone. Everyone else in the street heard it as well, and several people gave audible sighs of relief. A few even started walking again, assured that someone would come and stop the thugs. Shaggy saw that the thugs heard it as well, so he made his move. He pushed past several bystanders and made his way to the side of the purple alien. The suited man was holding a hot cup of coffee, which smelled of milk and some kind of nut to Shaggy's nose. Shaggy gave a quick check of his surroundings, before he gave a theatrical trip and slammed his shoulder into the lanky alien. Hot coffee spilled on both of them and Shaggy heard Slink gasp behind him as his target doubled over coughing. Shaggy immediately apologized. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jake. He said. I totally didn't mean to do that. Ugh. Cough cough, name's cough, not, the purple man sputtered. Come on, Jake. Let's get your replacement suit from your car. Shaggy lifted the alien by his collar and frog marched him further out of the crowd. They drew a few stares, but the sounds of running feet and what sounded like gunfire drew everyone's attention back to the street. Once they were clear, Shaggy gave another glance to the sky to check for drones before he slammed a fist into Jake's face. The lanky alien went limp and Shaggy instantly started going through the man's pockets. You can't be serious. Slink said from over his shoulder. There's a drone overhead and a speedster in the street. Shaggy turned his head to look and, sure enough, the thugs were now engaged with a supe dressed in purple and black. The speedy little super was dashing all around the thugs as they opened fire with various generic weapons. The speedster seemed to play it up for the drones, posing and making rude hand gestures at the criminals. Shaggy grinned. "Looks like an attention hog to me. That's good for us." His hand finally hit on something that felt like a key fob in his victim's pocket. And he pulled it out. It was a slick silver and black key fob with a button on it. Shaggy pressed the button and a blue sedan nearby chirped. Shaggy felt the grin spread on his face as he dragged the purple alien to his car. Over Slink's protesting, Shaggy threw open the door to the back seat and stuffed his unconscious victim in. "Time to go, kid," Shaggy said as the speedster down the street was literally running circles around the thugs. Slink sighed loudly before he dove into the back seat with their new friend. Shaggy quickly got in the driver's seat and started the car. Luckily, the key fob just had to be in the car for the button start to work. As the engine purred to life, Shaggy spun the wheel and put the action behind them as he sped away. The sounds of gunfire and whirring drones faded away as they drove. Shaggy dropped his hood and howled in triumph as he turned up the AC. "That was a stupid risk," Slink grumbled. "But did it pay off?" "That doesn't matter. Who knows what those drones picked up?" Shaggy sighed. "Don't worry. By the time anybody goes through that drone footage, we'll be long gone and this car will be back with its rightful owner." "We're not going to kill him?" Slink asked, gazing down at their unconscious passenger. "No need really. He didn't see our faces and we can just leave him in the car when we get to where we are going." "What about fingerprints and evidence?" Slink huffed. Shaggy shrugged as he turned onto a new street toward Barton Creek. "What's that going to tell them? Wanted criminal stole a car and left it in an upscale neighborhood? Big whoop. What if they have a psychometric cop or even a telepath?" "A what?" Shaggy turned to stare at his young friend. "A psychometric. You know, someone who can glean bits of information by touching objects." Slink explained. "That's a thing?" Shaggy asked. "Ah, of course it's a thing. This is a game about superpowered people. There are all kinds of bullshit powers. One of the major complaints coming from villain players has been the multitude of powers the police have. Psychometrics are the biggest pain." Shaggy turned their new vehicle northward and glanced back again. "So what if we dump the owner and vehicle in two different spots? That should buy us some time, right?" Slink nodded slowly and glanced down. The purple alien was still unconscious and Shaggy had to double-check if the alien was still breathing. Coming to a decision, Shaggy nodded grimly and slowed the car. They were just coming up on where the Barton Creek River would cross with the road. "Okay, get ready. I'll slow down, then we dump him near the river," Shaggy said. Slink looked up and down the street, checking for cars. Luckily, the road was pretty sparse. Only a few vehicles were making their way toward downtown Austin. They just had to watch out for any flying cars overhead. Shaggy slowed them to a stop, and they both jumped out. Shaggy glanced around before he helped Slink drag the purple man out and then rolled him down the small hill toward the river. "Did he go into the water?" Slink asked. "No idea, let's go." Shaggy barked as he made his way back toward the car. Slink hesitated for a few seconds before he seemed to scoff and joined Shaggy in the car. With a quick push of a button and a hard step on the pedal, they were away again. Shaggy heard his young friend sigh and chuckled. "See, scot-free, and we got a new ride out of the deal. Once we're done, we can take the car and dump it into the river, too. Then those Pisco-whatevers will have to look for it." Slink rubbed his face. It was a needless risk for the sake of comfort. "But we seem to be okay. For now." Shaggy shrugged and continued down the road, enjoying the cool breeze from the car's AC. Slink, however, wasn't done. "Just don't mention anything about what we do. Supposedly, psychometrics, which is what they are called, can see some past events. So better to stay hush about any details." "Got it, boss man." Short car ride in relative silence to avoid incriminating ourselves further. Shaggy chuckled. Slink snorted, and they spent the short remainder of their ride in peaceful silence. Shaggy couldn't keep the grin off his face. He was probably doing the most mundane thing a player could do in a video game. But the simple fact that he didn't have to walk anymore was a hell of a thing. They really needed to see about getting some better transport in Undertown. Granted, it was nowhere as big as Austin, but still nothing beat fast travel. The trip toward Barton Creek was a short one, and soon they were driving just outside the large gated community that made up the Barton Creek estates. A large, pristine white brick wall, topped with gaudy iron spikes, surrounded the entire community. Shaggy sucked in a breath as he noticed large cameras at various intervals on the wall. Slink must have seen them too, as the young man wiped a hand down his face in aggravation. "Let's dump the car first," Shaggy said as they coasted past the main gate of the property. Multiple large mansion behind its massive iron gate. Shaggy even clocked 3 guards monitoring the area in front of the gate. He couldn't see what they were carrying, but judging by the area they were guarding, Shaggy was willing to bet whoever they worked for spared no expense. Slink maintained his silence all the way to the edge of Barton Creek River, and even when he and Shaggy got out of the car, the boy was quiet. Shaggy put the car in neutral and threw the key into the river. As he got behind the car to push, he saw that Slink was staring back toward the gated community. Shaggy kept his mouth shut and pushed the sedan toward the river until gravity took hold and the thing rolled into the water with a splash. It didn't sink all the way, but Shaggy figured they were far enough for the road that few people would notice. He put his hood back up as he joined his friend. "Any ideas?" Shaggy asked as he gave Slink's shoulder a pat. The younger man sighed. "Not really. I was thinking about having Larry and Curly get around that fence, and then we can see. But we need a decent vantage point. Somewhere out of the way, so won't draw a lot of eyes." "Sounds good. But won't the cameras see a pair of snakes sneaking into their little safe haven?" Slink snorted. "Pfft. So what? Snakes may be pests, but they will not call the cops for a pair of snakes." "What about animal control?" Shaggy asked. "Please. My boys can get away from a couple of dog catchers. But if it really bothers you, I can have them dig. They're fossorial snakes." "Fossil what?" Shaggy raised an eyebrow as they made their way back toward the main road. "Fossorial. It means they can dig or burrow holes. So once they are in, all we have to do is wait." Slink looked up and down the road for a suitable spot to set up. Shaggy joined him in looking, but the area around the community seemed intentionally flat, with little to no cover. The grass was even cut short, so anyone walking through the fields south of the community would be immediately visible. Shaggy sucked on his teeth in annoyance. They really had made the estates like a damn fortress. They walked away from the community to get a better view, and when that proved pointless, Slink had them circle the entire 6-block community. The white brick wall really went around the entire community, it seemed. It was when they were near the northeastern side that they spotted it. A man-made hiking trail went up a small hill, and Shaggy could even see a small lookout cliff built just over the gated community. Probably so the rich people that owned those homes could look over their kingdom. Shaggy and Slink walked over and ignored the 4 Barton estate owners only sign and rushed up the hiking path. It was just wide enough for a golf cart, and Shaggy kept his ears open and his nose up for any signs of people. But the trail seemed unused. There were barely any signs of trash or the regular detritus that came with the normal passage of people. Shaggy would wager that hardly anyone from the estates even used the trail. Thankfully, the small collection of trees on the steep hill kept the sun off of them. But their clothes still made the hike upward a sweaty affair. Shaggy was seriously debating taking off the damn hoodie when the smell of rubber hit his nose and he stopped. They were almost to the lookout cliff and Shaggy was getting a myriad of smells. His sudden stop caught Slink off guard, but the boy seemed to catch on and started looking around worriedly. "Someone else is up here," Shaggy said, pulling his hood back up and slowly moving forward. Whoa. Hold up. Shouldn't we sneak or something? Let me send my snakes. Shaggy halted and thought about for a few seconds, before he nodded. Okay. Let's get into the trees, and you can do what you do. Slink gave Shaggy a smug look, and they both dashed into the sparse tree cover on the man-made hill. Shaggy kept his nose up and tried to parse the smells as he waited for Slink's normal moaning and groaning. But nothing came, and soon, Shaggy heard the telltale thumps of Slink's snakes dropping to the dirt. He turned to see Slink smugly smiling at him as his two little green snakes slithered up the hill. Got used to it, did ya? Shaggy asked. Oh yeah. Please don't say it that way. It's already creepy enough. Slink just continued to smile as he closed his eyes and focused on his mental connection with his snakes. Shaggy leaned up against a nearby tree and waited. He noted, idly, that all the trees at least seemed somewhat cared for. The ground was rough dirt with limited grass in places, but overall, the small hiking hill seemed pretty nice. Shaggy stopped his train of thought as Slink's body shivered a bit. Everything okay? Slink nodded but kept his eyes closed. Just sensed something, I think. But it's gone now. We've got a large black hover van with park restoration written on it. Seems empty. Think they're out here on the trail somewhere? Don't know. The van looks empty. Shaggy grinned. Great, maybe we can get out of this heat. Shaggy lifted his back from the tree, but Slink's body froze up again. This time, he didn't snap out of it for a good 10 seconds. When he did, he opened his eyes and rocked his head. Shaggy quickly moved to his friend and looked him over. Slink was sweating and trying to say speak. Tell a telepath. Slink got out just as Shaggy's world became pain. He was vaguely aware of falling to his knees as the worst pain he had ever felt spiked through his brain. His regeneration was useless as the pain tore into his ever mind and Shaggy couldn't tell left from right. He was also somewhat aware of screaming, but he wasn't sure if it was him or someone else. The pain went on and Shaggy was starting to think about trying to log out, but he couldn't even find his menus. Suddenly, just as soon as it started, it stopped and Shaggy had to shake the tears from his eyes. Dude. Slink's voice echoed from nearby. Shaggy shook his head and tried to look around. There were two gray and black blobs pushing up against each other just to his left. A little ahead of him was a black blob dancing in place. Shaggy stumbled as he tried to refocus his vision. Slink shouting brought his head around to the two wrestling blobs. Dude. Help. Slink's voice said. Shaggy vaguely remembered that Slink's hoodie had been gray. So he grew his claws and aimed for the black blob. He crouched low and pounced as he thrust his claws forward, aiming for the blob's head area. He felt his claws hit something and then the slow tear of skin as he rushed past. Expecting to hear a death gurgle, Shaggy was surprised when all he got was a loud yelp. Yow. Shaggy noted how deep the voice sounded and spun around for another attack. Blinking rapidly, he saw that the blobs now had shape, and they were both humanoids. The smaller one was obviously his friend, so he rushed toward the bigger one and leapt onto its chest. Large hands tried to grab him from the air and stop his arms, but Shaggy got one arm free and thrust it downward at his assailant. He felt his claws rake down the person's face and another gurgling scream resounded through the woods. The large body collapsed under their combined weight and Shaggy finally got a look at the blond human man that was trying to wrench him off. Shaggy had both his knees on the chest of a black-suited human man. The man was obviously a soup, as his strength was on par with Shaggy's. In fact, the guy seemed a little more powerful as he finally wrenched Shaggy off his chest. Shaggy noted that he had clawed the guy's face up pretty good as the guy reversed the mount and went to slam his fist down on Shaggy's face. Shaggy got his arms up and felt the blond man's large fist crash into his forearms. He could feel the bones on his arms give, even with their armor plating, and Shaggy quickly tried to think of a way out. But suddenly, Slink was there again. The young man slung an orange rope around the super-strong soup's neck and choked him out. Slink was too weak to drag the larger man off Shaggy, but the momentary pause was enough for Shaggy to get his claws back up and digging into the man's face. He jammed his claws upward, aiming for the eyes. This time the soup's tough skin didn't help as Shaggy claws shot straight through the man's eyes. The blonde soup jolted in surprise and then crashed to the ground. Slink whipped his rope around and let the man fall as Shaggy sighed. The big man remained unmoving as Shaggy wrung his arms out. The bastard was really strong, but luckily, his new armor held. Shaggy suddenly remembered there was another black blob and looked around. But Slink held up a hand. The orange snake, Mo, resting on the slim kid's shoulders. "She's down. Damn telepath whammied us both." Shaggy nodded, but didn't calm down until he saw the gray-haired woman collapsed on her face a short distance away. Her skin was an ugly green color, and Shaggy thought he saw Larry and Curly slithering around near her body. He vaguely realized the two people were both dressed in black suits, but Slink's voice brought him out of his thoughts. Shaggy nodded blearily before something else dawned on him. "Did you use your snake as a garrote?" Slink grinned. It was Mo's idea. The large orange snake hissed loudly and even seemed to nod. Shaggy shook off the implications of that and moved over toward the now dead blonde soup. His suit was covered in blood, but was otherwise okay. His face, however, was scratched up to hell and back. Shaggy had seen and done worse, but the fact that he had sliced the dude's eyes out was a little much. Shaggy flipped the big man over and began rustling through his pockets. "Check her," Shaggy ordered as he found the man's wallet and threw it to the side. But other than the man's wallet and a set of car keys, the soup wasn't carrying anything else. A sharp snap hiss brought Shaggy's head and claws around. But it was just Slink playing with a gun. The barrel was snapping with electricity, and Slink was grinning. Shaggy shook his head and picked up the man's wallet as he pocketed the keys. Opening the wallet, Shaggy was surprised at how empty it was. Except for a small, white ID with the man's face on it, there was nothing else in the wallet. Shaggy read over the ID before he cursed and reread it. "What?" Slink asked as he went through the woman's pockets. Although it looked like he was also coming up empty. "They're feds," Shaggy said, spinning the ID around for Slink to see. "Albert Monroe. Super-powered federal division." Slink read. Killing cops was bad enough. But killing a fed? That was some serious shit. Serious shit they were ill-equipped to deal with. Shaggy's brain raced a mile a minute as he tried to think of a way out of this. But other than burying the bodies and making a run to Undertown, he couldn't think of anything. Slink's calm voice spoke up as Shaggy was spiraling. "Seriously, you think you can?" Shaggy turned to see Slink addressing Mo, who was still laying across the boy's slim shoulders. The snake's head bobbed again, then it turned slowly to the woman's body. Slink nodded once, before he turned back to Shaggy. "Mo says he may be able to deal with one body. But he is going to be out of commission for a while. That'll leave us with the other one to deal with. He recommends we deal with the big one while he takes her." "He is going to deal with her? How?" Slink just shrugged as Mo slid down his shoulders and made his way toward the agent's body. A sick thought occurred to Shaggy, and the snake confirmed his fears as Mo's mouth opened wide. Wider than Shaggy ever thought imaginable, and swallowed the woman from her head on down. Shaggy turned his head to the other body, but the sounds of bones crunching and Mo swallowing would probably haunt him for a long while. Shaggy tried to tune out the noise as he thought of a way to deal with Albert. But nothing came to him besides burying the body. So he dug. The dirt was tough and dry in places, but with the help of his claws, he actually made quick work of the job. He even found it slightly enjoyable. Of course, climbing back out of the hole he had made and finding an almost comatose fat orange snake put a damper on his good mood. Slink was staring in awe at his rotund pet. "That was outstanding," Slink muttered. "You just clawed a man's eyes out." Slink shook his head. "He will have to stay here for a while. Larry and Curly are digging him a hole, and he'll stay there while he digests." I'm going to have to pick him up before we head back to Undertown. Someone is going to notice these agents are missing. We still need to get out of here, Shaggy said. Maybe. But first, don't you want to know what was in that van of theirs? Slink grinned as Shaggy groaned. The kid was right, that was a Fed van. There was bound to be something of use in there. But Shaggy really thought they should get as far away from this area as possible. But also loot. Shaggy finished burying Albert and stood with another groan of indecision. Finally, he grit his teeth and muttered, "Fine." Slink smiled and ran up the hill toward the lookout. Shaggy followed along slowly, giving Mo the snake a wide berth as Larry and Curly rolled the enormous snake into an even bigger hole. Mo seemed almost catatonic as he moved, and Shaggy thought he could see the outline of the poor Fed being slowly digested in the space snake's stomach. Shaggy shuddered as he rushed up the hill, trying to get the idea of being slowly digested out of his head. Shaggy and Slink found that the keys they had didn't open the back of the van. Luckily, breaking into the side door was pretty simple. All Shaggy had to do was slip a claw down the seam of the side door, cutting the lock, and they were in. Slink was the first into the back of the van. But Shaggy was stymied by the overwhelming smell coming from the van. It smelled like old sweat, piss, and something else. Something raunchier. "Oh God," Shaggy said as he backpedaled from the van's sliding door. "What?" Slink asked, worried, as he walked around the van's insides. "I think the Feds had themselves a little love nest." "How do you know?" Shaggy just pointed to his nose as he walked toward the front of the van. Luckily, the driver's side door was just as easy to snip open. It was also, thankfully, blocked from the back of the van with a thin sheet of metal. The back of the van's stink was less pungent up here. Shaggy checked the various dials and toggles on the van's dash. "We got GPS, city diagrams, and some kind of skyline interference device up here," Shaggy called back. Slink didn't answer, so Shaggy continued to search the front of the van. He found several journals, all written in pen and in some kind of blocky lettering. There was also a sign-out sheet for the van, listing the agents who requisitioned the vehicle and how much fuel they used. He tossed the sign-out sheet and journals into the passenger seat and continued searching. Shaggy was really hoping for some weapons or something. But the front of the van was mostly crumbled paper and food wrappers. Whoever these agents were, they had been out here a while. Shaggy found a few silver manacles that didn't have keyholes. They seemed to use some kind of heavy magnet or something to keep them closed. Even with all his strength, Shaggy couldn't get them loose. He smiled and tossed the set of cuffs in the air before catching them. "Don't know when y'all will come in handy. But I'm sure you will." Suddenly, the passenger door opened and Slink jumped in. Nothing but some high-tech monitoring equipment back there. Lot of stuff aimed down at the Barton Creek estates. So they were probably here investigating someone. Most likely, Slink said as he picked up the papers Shaggy had tossed and started going through them. Shaggy let out a low growl as he stared down at the large estates in the gated community. From their vantage point, they had a decent look down on several properties. Each large mansion seemed more eclectic than the last. Some were large, multi-story palatial mansion, while others were squat, neo-modern buildings. Shaggy even spotted some green, yellow, and red funhouse-looking thing. He shuddered at the thought of a super-rich clown running around down there. "Holy shit, dude!" Slink screamed, batting Shaggy on his arm excitedly. Shaggy barely felt the taps, but still grabbed the kid's hand and looked over. Slink was face deep in the sign-out sheet for the van. Even with his face somewhat obscured, Shaggy could tell the kid was smiling like crazy. "What is it?" Slink looked up. "Dude." The young man thrust the sign-out sheet back at Shaggy. He grumbled slightly, but he took the sheet and read the lists of names. Various agents had checked out this van from a nearby federal field office. It hadn't been checked out in a few months, but Shaggy didn't see the connection. His thoughts must have shown on his face as Slink groaned and took the book back and spun it around. He tapped a pale finger against the latest entry and Shaggy read it aloud. Donovan Marshall. So? Arg. Slink yelled. So? The agent's name down the hill was Albert Monroe. Oh, shit, there's another one? Shaggy started looking around, went to get out of the driver's seat, but Slink punched him in the arm. No, dumbass. Look at the date. Marshall checked out this van over a month ago. There's even an annotation of him turning it in a week later. I think these agents stole this van, or at least didn't put it on the books. Shaggy scratched his head. Okay, so they stole it. Doesn't that mean the feds are probably looking for it? Does this thing have a tracker on it? Slink rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It probably did, but if Monroe and the other agent stole this van, then they probably removed it, right? Maybe. Shaggy began searching around the cab for anything that looked like a tracking device. Although, in reality, he did not know what he was looking for. He just hoped that the thing would have a blinking red light on it. But after a cursory search of the van's cab, he couldn't find anything. Grumbling again, he moved to get out of the van. Look in the back. Hopefully, it's aired out by now. Slink didn't seem to hear him as the pale boy was face deep in the journals. But he gave Shaggy a grunt of affirmation. Shaggy waved the boy off and cautiously snuck back to the side of the van. He kept his nose pointed away, but the smell of sweat, sex, and urine still hit him. It was considerably less potent now, but it still burned. What kind of sick bastards were these? Shaggy muttered as he climbed into the van. The back of the van's interior was a cramped rectangular room with one side full of various monitors and equipment. There were 2 short chairs pushed off to the side near the front of the van. Near the back were 2 sleeping bags that had been laid out on the floor. Shaggy spotted the source of the piss smell immediately. It was a large plastic bucket that looked like it was half full. Shaggy turned up his nose and grabbed the container. But Slink's voice stopped him. Don't throw out the piss. That would be evidence that we were here. Grr. I think the bodies would be evidence, too. Shaggy muttered, but he put down the plastic container full of piss and covered his nose. All the electronic equipment and Holo-Terminals were deactivated. There were a few racks on the inner door side of the van, but they all looked empty. Whatever they were supposed to be carrying looked pretty bulky, though. Shaggy guessed that they held some kind of heavy weapons or other large ordnance. He was about to leave, the smell of urine getting to him, when he spotted a small circular device. It had a dead red light at the top and a series of wires stick out the bottom. Shaggy grinned. Dude. Shaggy leapt from the back of the van and ran around to the front again. I found it. At least it looks like. Are you crying? Slink raised red-rimmed eyes, and Shaggy could see water slowly filling the boy's wide eyes. Slink clutched a journal in his hands and sniffled softly. Shaggy swallowed, uncomfortable with the obvious emotion on the boy's face. Are you, okay? Slink wiped a hand over his eyes and sniffed again. Yeah. Sorry. It just got to me. Apparently I was right. These agents are AWOL. All tracking on the van has been disabled. We'll have to be careful if we use any federal tech, but we can have that looked into later. For now, just treat it like a normal van with some decent spy equipment in the back. Shaggy got into the driver's seat and sighed. Okay. So what's the story? It's stupid. Slink chuckled. The type of schlock you'd get on the daytime vids IRL. Don't leave me in suspense. Shaggy chuckled. Ha, Slink let out a breath before he continued. Ziva Parrots. Aged 32. She was the telepath. These are her personal journals. I don't know why she brought a bunch of them with her. Maybe it's the game setting up a story hook or something. Maybe she didn't intend to go back home. I don't know. You're stalling. It's a big look into her life. Joining the agency, meeting Albert, her friendship with her partner, Christy. Struggling to be seen at the agency. Not to mention the distrust she got from people. Apparently, being a mind reader doesn't instill a lot of goodwill in people. Shaggy sighed and sat back in the driver's seat. The boy was circling to the main point, slowly. Then Ziva and Christy caught the tail of some big-time criminal out here. So they went at it hard. Started making arrests, putting people into high-security soup prisons. They even got a few people to turn state's evidence. Things were looking up. Until they weren't. Shaggy said, seeing where this particular in-game hook was going. Slink nodded. Until they weren't. Christy and Ziva got a call about another informant of theirs wanting to meet. Ziva was on a date with Albert, so Christy went alone. It was a trap. She didn't make it. Ziva and Albert found her body days later. The things they did to her. Ziva wrote she was still having nightmares about it. Shaggy got the rest of the picture. Ziva went off the deep end. Targeting this crime lord guy or whoever he was. Probably drug Albert along. Maybe he also felt guilty? Shaggy sighed as he gazed out over the estates. The kid was right. It was the kind of storyline you'd get from a vid show. One of revenge and probably full of action and near misses. And they had brought that little story to an abrupt end. Huh. Shaggy laughed loudly. That's what makes this a great game, kid. That's the point of movies, books, games, or, hell, any other kind of media. The great ones draw out some kind of empathetic response. Sure, nothing in those journals is real, but you can identify with the emotions they are trying to convey and you resonate with that. It can feel pretty good at times when a great story beat or moment draws out some honest emotion in a person. None of this feels good, Shags. Slink grimaced. Ziva went in depth at the damage done to Christy. I don't think she wanted to forget what happened. Some of it was disgusting. Slink's eyes went glassy as he stared at the estates just outside the van's front window. Shaggy sighed, crossed his arms. So, what do you want to do? Slink blinked, then turned to Shaggy. What? What do you want to do with this newfound feeling and the information this very lifelike game has given you? We still need to finish our own job here. Slink waved around the journal he was still holding. This is stuff for heroes, Shags. We're villains. Shaggy howled with laughter. Bahahahaha. Come on, kid. You know what the best part about being a villain is? Slink laughed. Haha. You know that just sounds like poor impulse control, right? Who the hell cares? So who's this other guy we're hitting other than Spiegel? Shouldn't we wait to tell the others? Maybe take this fancy truck to them or something? Shaggy waved the boy off. Bah. We're here. Let's at least finish the job we came to do. Now we just have to hit a second criminal. Shaggy grinned as he tried to put his feet up on the van's dashboard. But the array of trash in the way made it tricky. Eventually, he settled for just leaning back and grinning. Pfft. Slink stifled a laugh as he sighed again. Aha. His name is Teo Santos, and he leads one of the largest gangs of soups in Texas. There were rumors they were moving out to Austin, but nothing concrete until Ziva tracked him here. She didn't know who all he brought out here, but she figured it was a few of his top people. Sounds exciting. Well, at the very least, it won't be boring. But I still think we should tell the others first. We can treat it like a small-scale event thing. Just for our group. Okay. Shaggy rubbed his hands together. We can raid this Teo guy later. For now, let's use some of this fancy equipment to find Drew Spiegel. Slink groaned as he made to get out of the van. Do you even know how to use some of this equipment? No idea. But how hard could it be? Huh? Guh yeah, just don't oof stop. Shaggy cringed at the sounds of sex coming from the van's extensive audio system. They had finally gotten everything up and running. Then they had to point all the super-sensitive mics toward the right house. Which took a lot of trial and error. Eventually, they found one where a woman's voice was shouting some rather explicit directions at a man named Drew. Thankfully, they weren't getting any video though. For some reason, Slink seemed to still be looking for that function. "We really don't need to see this," Shaggy said as he turned down the grunting voices. "Come on, Shags. There are worse things on the net. Besides, we need to verify it's the right Drew," Slink said as he toggled a few switches and hit a few different buttons. The pale youth had the van's manual in his lap and was continuously referring to it while they worked. The van seemed specifically designed for surveillance. It was even supposed to come with a full suite of drones and a few microbots, none of which they had been able to find. Shaggy couldn't even get the holoscreens to work. Although, to be fair, he stopped looking when the sounds of coitus came bursting from the van's speakers. Shaggy grimaced as a particularly loud grunt emanated from the speakers, followed by a responding grunt from the female participant. He wearily reached out to turn the volume up just in time to hear the woman's voice say irately, "Is that it?" "Huh?" Drew's voice asked tiredly. "You cannot be done already?" the woman screeched. "Geez, Melanie. I'm not a damn robot." "No. You're a grown-ass man who can't handle a mature woman, it seems." "Mature. Right?" Drew trailed off, sounding increasingly annoyed. Shaggy shook his head as the two adults bickered. Wasn't exactly his idea of post-coitus conversation. Slink was now leaning under the massive bank of monitors and speakers, looking for something. There was some noise, and Shaggy was sure Slink had moved something under the desk when Melanie said something interesting. "My husband could buy and sell your measly construction company 100 times over." Shaggy heard Slink stop as Drew guffawed. "But apparently he can't take care of his wife like I can." Shaggy immediately glanced at Slink, who had dragged his head from under the desk. They stared at each other wide-eyed for a few seconds before Shaggy fell to his knees. "We need the recon drone. Also, we need to get the screens on. Depends who her husband is. But if we can find out, we can really put the hurt on Pump Drew." Shaggy grinned as he dove under the desk and started moving cardboard boxes out of the way. A good deal of the boxes seemed filled with bits of tech. Most of them were even labeled junk or recall. Shaggy grinned at what they could do with a van full of excess federal equipment. But he stayed goal-oriented until, finally, they pulled a dusty old drone from under the monitor desk. Shaggy cheered as the sounds of Drew and Melanie making up filtered through the speakers. Nearby, Slink also gave a brief cheer as he pointed at one of the large legs of the desk. "Got it," Slink said as he dashed forward, and Shaggy heard something click and the buzz of screens coming to life filled his ears. Shaggy and Slink rose from under the desk to find multiple blue holoscreens come alive. Most of them were showing images of a squat, neo-modern house with lots of glass. A fit, tanned alien was standing on the balcony of the house smoking a cigarette and staring out at the other houses. Shaggy raised an eyebrow at the buff man pictured on all the screens and wondered if this was the now-deceased agent's target. "Of course," Slink shouted. "All the drones are currently watching Teo. That was their goal in the first place. So all we need to do is reorient them like we did the mics. Except this time we'll be able to see what the hell we are doing." Shaggy muttered as he set down the 1.5-foot-long drone he had grabbed from under the desk. "Just give me a second." Shaggy grunted. "I don't think we have a second. Our adulterous pair are about to split." It was true. The audio of Drew and Melanie was filled with the sounds of the impassioned pair saying goodbye to each other. It sounded like Melanie needed to get back home while Drew was going to go back to his office to do some work for his company. Shaggy could almost see the derisive face of Melanie as she quipped. "You? Working? Come on, Drew. We both know what you're really going to do the second I walk out the door." "Melanie, I am a serious business owner. I have my fingers in a lot of pies." "I am sure you do, Drew. But let's be real. The only real bit of business you have ever done was sleep with me for the dad contract. Let's not pretend otherwise." Oh, like you don't enjoy it, baby. You know I do, big man. Melanie chuckled as the sounds kissing filled the speakers. On the screens, Slink was slowly moving the various drones over the other houses in Drew's neighborhood. Shaggy grit his teeth as Slink maneuvered several drones at once. He sat down in the second chair and peered over the mini screens he could see. Apparently there were also several mini-robots within Teo's house, and Slink hadn't moved those yet. You need a hand? Shaggy asked as he tried to get a sense of the various keyboards and dials on the surveillance desk. No. I think I managed to slave all the drones to one controller. It's just tricky to fly them. My dad bought me a few IRL. Though they weren't as beefy as these. Slink said as he carefully maneuvered the drones. The kid was using a throttle and stick that had popped up from the desk. Looking at the screens, Shaggy thought he was doing a fairly good job. 6 little screens zoomed the immaculately manicured lawns and past the heavily trimmed trees. Shaggy bit his lip as a thought hit him. Wait. Can they see the drones? Slink shook his head. No. What we are seeing is a zoomed-in perspective. The drones are actually pretty high in the air. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to contend with all the trees and antennas these rich houses have. Shaggy nodded as he sat back and listened to Melanie's and Drew's goodbyes. The pair seemed to despise each other, but for some reason, they were pretending they didn't. Shaggy shook off the confusing relationship and just listened as Melanie finally left and Drew gave a rather sigh over the audio. Movement flickered on the drone screens just as the sound of a door closing hit the speakers. Peeking over, Shaggy got a look of a rather tall woman with bone-white skin and rainbow-colored hair. She was standing outside the door to the plantation-style mansion, reapplying something to her face. Shaggy shared a look with Slink, and the boy nodded. They had found their target. There was a loud clicking noise as Slink pressed a button on his stick and Shaggy heard a whirring noise from beside him. The desk was printing out a picture Slink had just taken of the woman. For later. Slink said. Shaggy nodded as he watched the woman move down the house's driveway and toward a red hover car. She got in the back and, after a few minutes, the car's auto-drive feature launched the vehicle up and away from the house. Shaggy tried to reorient the mics during that time, but no sound was escaping the car. Obviously, the woman had better security in her car than Drew had in his house. Although Slink managed to get an image of her car. Shaggy grinned and reoriented the cameras back toward Drew Spiegel's house. He was just in time to hear a loud noise. Shaggy looked over to Slink, but the boy was busy rapidly getting the drones in place. Once he had one locked into position, he would be to the next. Slowly, he built a wide camera net over the entire house. Once he was done, Slink hit various buttons on the console while occasionally looking down at the manual in his lap. Anything I can do to help, kid? Shaggy asked, feeling a little useless. Slink looked up, startled for a few seconds before he seemed to think about it. Oh, yeah. Find the yellow dial and a blue switch and turn them on. That should give us an image of the inside of the house. Like a heat map? No. A literal live image. We'll be able to see in real time. Just be careful with the dial. If you push it too far, we'll be looking at Drew's bones. Shaggy nodded and went on a small hunt for the switches. He found them buried behind a small hollow screen showing Teo Santos' kitchen. He flipped the blue switch, slowly started spinning the dial as he watched the screens. The white mansion seemed to bleed away as the image showed the stonework underneath, then the woodwork, and then the inside of the house. It was like some kind of X-ray vision they could control. Shaggy grinned as Slink brought a drone around the building searching for Drew. They found him on the second story in a small office surrounded by books and trophies. However, Drew's focus was on a small pile of purple dust laying on the desk. Audio had been playing this entire time, but now they got to watch Drew duck his head into the dust and take a large sniff. The cameras on the drones were pretty decent, too. They could see the dilation in Drew's eyes as he popped his head back up and coughed. Dude is blitzed out of his mind. Shaggy muttered. Being able to see Drew this close made him watch the volume of his voice. Like somehow Drew would hear them. Slink, however, had no such compunction. The young man grunted disapprovingly. Man's entire business is cleaning up the city, and he is here getting high. Shaggy chuckled. Heh. You know, many people would say that's the dream. He does nothing, and his thousands of workers make him richer. Slink simply grumbled as Drew took another hit of dust and then sat back in his chair, grumbling. Shaggy shook his head and then glanced at the other screens. They had multiple angles on the house, all showing an X-ray view of the insides. Shaggy was surprised to see that Drew was alone. No housekeeper, no guards. He went to point it out to Slink when Drew suddenly moved. The stocky man practically leapt from his office chair and ran to the door. Then Drew stopped and turned around, rushing back to his desk. He pushed some papers out of the way until he found a flat disk and started yelling into it. Hey! Guards! The people are back. Back in my house. You need to come catch them. They are going to touch my art. There was a brief pause and Slink and Shaggy looked at each other worriedly. But soon the flat disk came to life and an image of a person came to life over the flat disk. Sir. We are not showing signs of anyone in your domicile. Mr. Spiegel, as we have informed you, your security is state of art. No one has broken in. You are perfectly safe. Fuck you. I am perfectly safe. They're here, I tell you. Inside the walls. They want my goodies. Drew screamed back, shaking the communication device. Shaggy had to stifle a laugh as the guard continued to try to talk down the paranoid businessman. Slink watched the communication with rapt attention, however. He even moved a few drones to look down at the road, waiting to see if any guards showed up. No one did, and eventually Drew yelled himself out. Once he had pulled a promise to check the premises from the guard, Drew went back to his desk, took another hit, and then passed out. The sounds of loud snoring echoed through the vehicle. Well, that was entertaining at least, Shaggy grinned. And informative. Now we know no one will believe Drew if someone breaks into his house. Yeah, probably, cried Wolf one too many times. Slink grinned at him until Shaggy picked up on his unintentional joke. Shaking his head, he took a peek at the other cameras and found that Teo was now cooking something in his kitchen while talking on his phone. Shaggy tried to find an audio switch for the mini-robots, but he couldn't until Slink pointed out another switch. Flicking it, a heavily accented voice filled the car as food sizzled on the stove. No, I want some of the crew brought up here. I have my people, but I need grunts. Austin is ripe for the picking. With the city in shambles and HLO placating the soups, we have a way into the local underground. There was a muffled voice over the other end of the line. Obviously, Teo was using a more traditional phone. Probably so he wouldn't be overheard. Teo sat his spatula down on the counter and laughed at whatever was said. Ha ha ha. Please. The supervillains out here are a joke. Besides, we won't be doing that kind of grandstanding, anyway. Just get some of our boys on the bullet and I'll take care of the rest. There was another pause as Teo picked up his spatula again. K. Daijo? What? Feds? Don't worry about it. They got nothing on me. Just send the guys. With that, Teo sat his phone down and went about making his food. Shaggy nodded as he switched the audio back to Drew. It looked like Teo Santos and his crew were about to come crashing into Austin. Well, if we needed another reason to hit this guy, there it is. Shaggy grinned. Slink turned the page on the van's manual as he nodded. Yeah, but now we have a deadline. Shaggy nodded and checked the time on the console's readout. It was just past 2 in the afternoon. They could probably call it a day and go tell the others what they learned. When he said as much to Slink, the boy nodded but didn't move. He seemed to be in deep thought and Shaggy let the kid collect himself. I think we should put the photo of Melanie coming out of Drew's house out on the net. Then tomorrow evening, we can bring the others and invade both Teo's place and Drew's. Drew's first probably, because that will be easier, I think. Okay. Why? Slink waved a hand at the screens, most of which showed an unconscious Drew snoring into his desk. The others showed a mild-mannered crime lord eating a late lunch. Drew is already a paranoid wreck. So once we release the photo, he'll lose his shit. My hope is he'll try to consolidate whatever evidence of his misdoings he has, making it easier for us to grab. Got it. Then we hit Teo. That one is going to be more shock and awe. We hit him hard and fast, take what we can, then bolt out of there. Shaggy nodded happily. Sounds like my kind of party. Now all we have to do is get this van back to the guys and tell them the plan. Slink lifted the giant manual. You drive. I'm going to read more of this. Maybe there's a feature on the drones or bots that'll help us. Shaggy nodded as he moved toward the van door. He swung it open as the Texas heat hit him again. He groaned as he stretched his legs and moved to the driver's seat. Shaggy put the keys in the ignition and checked that the nearby skylanes were clear. He was a little hesitant to use the Fed's interference device, but he figured it could be a last resort. For now, he set the large repulsors under the van to medium output and got ready to take off. Squinting against the sun, Shaggy took them out and over the Barton Creek estates, angling for the nearest skylane. He grinned at what tomorrow would bring and pushed more speed into the hover van, zooming back toward their friends. Shaggy and Slink had to wait a few hours for the other guys to get off work, but they made sure to park in an alleyway not far off from the Spiegel offices. Once the mass of workers began to leave all at once, Shaggy turned the car back on and followed the silhouette of his large Pyrenean friend. Ren was walking with Vlad and Dave, along with Ralph, who didn't look too happy to be a part of their group. They were all headed toward Callahan's and Dave seemed to be excitedly talking about something when Shaggy pulled up. Hey! You kids want some candy? Shaggy cackled out of the window. Vlad raised an eyebrow while Dave stopped talking and stared. Ren looked a little aggrieved. You cannot be serious. You stole a van? Shaggy pulled back from the window, putting up a hurt expression. Why, I would never deprive another person of the hard-earned goods or vehicles. The very idea. Ren and Vlad didn't look like they believed him. But Dave was excitedly circling the van in the street like a puppy. Shaggy had slowed them down to a crawl on the empty road, but they were still moving. Slink's voice emerged from the back and the sliding door opened a bit as the van moved. We didn't steal it. It's a long story, but we'll get to it later. Callahan's? Vlad nodded as Ren confirmed. Callahan's. Ralph looked like he wanted to ask something, but Shaggy lurched the van forward. Moving a hover vehicle that wasn't on the designated skylanes was tricky, but not too difficult. Unless there's an excitable mutant running around your damn van. Dave made it a little game to race the van. Luckily, their destination wasn't that far away. Once they had arrived at the small diner, Shaggy brought the van around to the back of the building and parked it. He glanced at the words emblazoned on the side of the black van and turned thoughtful. While park restoration was probably a suitable cover, they would probably need to repaint the van. Slink scampered out of the van and joined him in the parking lot. Seeing his gaze, the young man nodded. Yeah, we're going to have to change it. And the digital tracking codes. Shaggy grimaced as they turned toward the diner. I thought those were turned off. We found the tracker, right? Yeah, but the codes are still embedded in the van's personal network. If anyone scans it, they are going to find out that it's a federal truck. Slink explained right before they passed into the diner. Callahan's diner was much more subdued than it had been the previous night. There even seemed to be fewer people around. Although Ren and the others stood out. They had commandeered a booth at the back of the room and Dave was waving at various people. Ralph was nowhere to be seen, and Shaggy really didn't care about the man. Pushing their way toward the booth, Shaggy grinned wolfishly as he approached. Ren and Vlad had the surly looks of people not enjoying their jobs. Dave was, as always, fairly oblivious to the general mood. Slink pushed his way past Shaggy and dove into the fake leather seat, thumping the van's manual down on the table. "Is it okay to bring that in here?" Shaggy asked as he took a seat next to Vlad. Slink shrugged. "Probably. But I couldn't get much reading done in the van. I get carsick." Shaggy nodded as the boy opened the book and began reading. Vlad and Ren were shooting him looks, asking for an explanation. But Shaggy waved down a server first and ordered a round for the table. "On Ralph's tab, of course." Shaggy grinned. "It's just my prodigious luck." Ren bit back a retort as Vlad sighed. "Okay, Shags, you've had your fun. Now answer the damn questions." "You're teetering on annoying." Shaggy sighed as he explained. Although he tried to leave out his early car-stealing exploits, but Slink wouldn't let him. So he quickly told the story of their car-stealing shenanigans, and then he explained about the Barton Creek estates. He also told them about the estate's security and the tacky mansions housed in the community. Then he explained about their recon efforts and the eventual fight with the feds. Finishing with the discovery of the van and Slink's new mission to rob another crime lord. Ren sat back and sighed as Shaggy finished explaining. "You're a damn menace." "What? You killed 2 federal agents and stole their van?" Ren whispered angrily. Shaggy just grinned back and then grimaced as Vlad slapped the side of his head. "Calm down, Ren. You know better than that. It wouldn't be that simple, even if Shaggy hadn't taken the kid. With Slink there, the two of them wouldn't do something so stupid even they didn't think they could get away with it." Ren sighed loudly as Slink grinned over his book. Dave looked at all of them before he asked a question of his own. "So, what about the Spiegel dude? You told us about this Teo guy the feds were watching, but the recon was for, Drew." Ren said helpfully. "You were supposed to find some dirt on Drew." Shaggy was about to explain, but the printed picture of Melanie leaving Drew's house hit the table. Slink tapped it twice before he set his book down. "That's Melanie. Drew's lover. But he's not her husband." Ren and Vlad craned their neck over the picture before sitting back and turning contemplative. Slink picked the picture back up and put it in the book. "Hardly a smoking gun," Vlad whispered as he sipped at his red drink. "But it could be disruptive," Ren said. Slink nodded along, but he quickly explained their plan. They were going to release the photo and let the net do its thing, and then tomorrow evening they would hit both Drew and Teo's places. Drew's for more information and Teo's so they could stop another crime family from invading Austin. Dave seemed excited, and Ren nodded understandingly. But Vlad seemed hesitant. "Do we really want to hit another crime lord? Undertown is already going to be a mess. If it gets out that we hit this Santos guy, shit's not going to be good." Shaggy grunted as he drained his beer. "It will not be good if another major family comes into town, anyway. We go scorched earth on these guys and then disappear back home. It may be a delaying tactic, but at least it will put them on the back foot for a while." Vlad grimaced. "Or they could come running down here in full force, looking for who killed their boss. Which is why we are also going to rob Teo Santos." Slink cut in. "He has to have something there that we can turn over to the police. Hopefully, that will make the Santos crime family back off or even get them on the run." Shaggy nodded as Vlad seemed to think about. The diner was slowly filling with people, and this line of discussion was going to get tricky soon. Ralph was at the bar, looking sullen, while the mixture of workers and civilians were mingling and talking. Shaggy glanced up at Ren, smiling. "So how was work?" Ren chortled into his large mug. "Huh. Same old, same old. Boring ass lifting and pulling in the scorching sun while Vlad and Dave got to enjoy some AC. Sorry Rito dude, I didn't pick the jobs. But I promise, while I am off enjoying my air conditioning, I'll think of you," Dave said, draining his own beer. "Huh. Shut up." Slink back to reading and Shaggy. The other four discussed their plans for the night. Vlad explained Ralph was so sullen because Ren had browbeat the poor man into offering his apartment for the night again. Ren just shrugged and finished his beer as Dave explained his own day and the various people he had met when he was out delivering materials. Shaggy was only half listening to the excitable man when a scent caught his nose. He turned to track the new earthy scent when the door to the diner opened and several women entered. They were chatting animatedly as they moved as a group toward the bar. Shaggy noticed that all four of them smelled the same. A weird mix of dirt and chemicals that clashed with their apparel. All four of them were dressed for a night on the town and they seemed to be in the middle of a pub crawl or something. Shaggy was wondering what brought them all the way out here when Vlad tapped his arm. "Ain't you married, Shags?" "Of course I am," Shaggy growled. "They just smell funny?" "How so?" Shaggy shook it off and dragged his eyes away from the group of women. "No idea." "Like nature and science mixed." "Magic?" Ren asked. "Probably," Shaggy said, filing the smell away and going back to his drink. His wife should have been in the game by now. Yet he had received no message about where to meet up. He really hoped she would not play a prank or something again. Last time, she had gotten them thrown out of a theater with her antics. Shaggy grinned at the memory as another smell hit his nose, this one far more familiar. It was sulfur. Shaggy turned to the door just in time to see Zelthub step through the door. The cop was dressed in plain clothes. Although his red skin clashed with the navy polo shirt he was wearing. Zelthub scanned the bar until his eyes fell on Shaggy's table. "We got incoming," Shaggy muttered. Shaggy winced as almost everyone at his table turned to look at the demon cop walking toward their table. Ren kept his face forward, but he grimaced as something occurred to him. "Oh yeah, the cops were looking to talk to you." Shaggy snapped an angry look at his alien friend. "Really?" Ren shrugged. It was a long day. Shaggy sighed as Zelthub got to their table and scanned them all. Shaggy was sure the demon was memorizing all their faces before he grinned, showing off stark white pointed teeth. Shaggy grinned back, but said nothing, waiting for the cop to make the first move. Zelthub glanced at all of them again before he dragged a chair over and sat down. "You're a hard man to track down," Zelthub said, addressing only Shaggy. "Yeah, I didn't really like warehouse work. So my friend and I went out into the city to find work elsewhere. Slim pickings, though. Even with the recent invasion and all." Zelthub nodded. "You heard about that? I thought you lot were from out of town?" "Yeah, but giant robots are going to be big news for a bunch of drifters looking for work." "I suppose so." Zelthub nodded. "What can I do for you, officer?" "My friend said you were looking for me?" Zelthub glanced at Ren, but nodded amiably. "Sure was. But not me, my department. I am under orders to find you and offer you a freelance contract." Shaggy's eyes widened, and he was sure he heard Vlad suck in a breath. "Freelance? For the cops?" Zelthub grimaced as he rubbed his knuckles. "We have a glow problem, Mr. Shaggy. Now we have several departments out looking for the stuff. But we are stretched thin with recent events. With your ability to track glow, my department is ready to offer you a lucrative contract to help us hunt down suppliers and shut down production." Shaggy sucked in a breath. It was a tempting offer. If he wasn't a damn wanted criminal. Ren was staring at him as Vlad pulled at his shirt under the table. Slink ducked his head lower over his book and Dave was damn near vibrating with excitement. "Ahem, how would that work exactly?" Shaggy asked, ignoring the pain from Vlad angrily pinching him. Zelthub's dark eyes took them all in before he explained. "Well, we would have you come into the station and fill out some paperwork. But afterwards you'd be assigned a liaison who would give you details. Places to search and possible suspects, things like that. For big busts, you'd have to have police supervision, but for the most part, you shut down drug production in the Austin area and we pay you to do it." He glanced at Shaggy's friends. "Well, you and anyone who helped you, of course." Dave was damn near shaking the table with excitement as Vlad took a long draw from his flask of blood. Ren was still staring at Shaggy, but Slink had picked his head up from his book. Shaggy cracked his knuckles nervously as he thought about it. It wasn't a bad gig overall. Stop drug suppliers get paid. The only thing stopping them was the fact that they were criminals. But who said that every vial of glow would be turned over to the police? Say we or I, Shaggy started slowly, were to do this. What would happen if I had been a little bad when I first entered the city? For the first time, the entire table went still, and all eyes were on Zelphab. The large demon man sat back in his chair and stared at Shaggy. He seemed to weigh things up in his mind. Shaggy put his hands under the table and got ready to transform them into claws. But suddenly, Zelphab pushed his chair closer to the table and whispered. "How bad?" Shaggy gulped at the intensity of the demon's stare, but he didn't blink. "Attempted mugging," he said, adding quickly. "Hypothetically." Zelphab nodded before he smiled. "Bah. We can make that go away if you help us." "How long ago?" Shaggy shook his head. "You know, I can't really remember." "Right," Zelphab said, sounding unconvinced. "Well, you bring yourself down to the station and we'll get you sorted out." Zelphab pushed his chair away and stood, drawing a few eyes. But people mostly went back to their drinks. Shaggy noted that the table of earth-scented woman was looking over their way. But Zelphab gave them all another look over, before he smiled and waved. The big demon was barely to the door when Vlad started punching Shaggy in the side. "That was absolutely the dumbest thing you have ever done since I've known you." Shaggy took another pull from his beer and grinned. "Give me time. The night is still young." Vlad huffed angrily and turned to the others, but Ren cut off his tirade. "We're doing it," the large alien said simply. Vlad stopped short and glared at the bigger man. Slink tossed in his own thoughts. "If they get rid of our record, moving around topside will be easier." The kid drew Vlad's angry gaze next, but Dave finally couldn't contain himself. He stood from the table and started a weird little dance as he chanted. "I'm going to be a super. I'm going to be a super." Vlad banged his head on the table and Shaggy was about to explain his reasoning when a soft voice called from over his shoulder. Excuse me?" Shaggy turned, along with the others at his table, to see a tall woman with skin the color of obsidian and purple eyes and hair. Shaggy thought she looked like a drow elf. She even had pointed ears. She was looking at Shaggy excitedly as she stumbled over her words. Over her shoulder, Shaggy could see her friends all gazing at them happily. Shaggy sighed as he guessed where this was going. I'm sorry." Shaggy interrupted. "I'm married." The drow woman's face flashed from surprised to angry. No. I'm sorry. You've seemed to have misunderstood. I was just going to ask about your demon friend." "Like, who is he?" Shaggy felt his face heat up as he ducked his head to the table and let his friends answer. After a quick exchange with Ren, the woman snorted and walked back to her own table of friends. She was barely a few steps away when his friends burst out laughing. "I'm sorry. I'm married," Vlad mocked. "Oh, shut up," Shaggy said as he drained his beer and watched the table of women pay for their drinks and leave. The drow woman looked back at him and grinned as she stepped through the door.